Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, a Georgia rail worker joins to talk about the tentative agreement that they've got. And did the newly elected school board member call all rank-and-file Republicans parasites? The answer to that question is no. Selma city workers, Lowndes County workers are on strike. Alabama prisoners could be next, and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the program, we've got a phone number, and the line is open. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might play it on the next program and answer your question. If you have if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us online. We are anywhere you find anything online: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you find your podcasts. Newly on TikTok, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. If you want to become a sustaining member of the program, make a one-time donation, or buy our new hat, you can go to our website, tvlr.fm, or become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've also got these cool new shirts that say join a union or the boss will get you, based on the I-65 sign near Montgomery. It's very, very cool. We sold one order of those shirts already. If you would like to be on the next order, then go to our website, tvlr.fm, and fill out the contact form and request to be put on a list to be notified of our next drop. Also, if you're a member of a union, you should get your local to sponsor the show. Reach out to me for more details on that. So, folks, I'm going to let you peek behind the curtain just a bit. We're having some technical difficulties. There are some gremlins in the lines this morning, and we have been so far unable to monitor the anything from our computer. So I'm not sure how we're going to be able to pull in our guest, but what we might do, I know it's a little bit early for an ad break, but Adam, Ben, how about we go ahead and go to our first break and see if we can't get something figured out in those 3 to 4 minutes. What do you think, guys?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, we're going to go to a break. We will be right back. Hopefully, we can kick out all those gremlins. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know about how viable clean and renewable energy is. To that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to more than thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state. We're working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about our work and how you can join us at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Join a union or the boss will get you. This is the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate your patience as we try to work out some of these gremlins. We haven't got the gremlins out of the wires, but we have a workaround for today. Hopefully. We hope. We hope. So we've got a workaround for today, I believe. And we've got our first guest on the line. His name is Hugh Sawyer Jr. He is a locomotive engineer on Norfolk Southern Railroad, working primarily on the main line between Atlanta and Chattanooga. He's a member of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, Division 316, which is a Teamsters affiliate. He's a rank-and-file member right now as he winds down to retirement, but he has served the membership in the past as local chairman, president, and legislative representative. He's also a member of Railroad Workers United, an inter-union cross-craft solidarity caucus of railroad workers and their supporters from all crafts, all carriers, and all unions across North America. He's also our next guest. Hugh, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
Good morning, Jacob. Glad to be here.
Good morning. Good morning. It's good to have you here. So, last week, We spoke to Jonah Furman, staff writer and organizer at Labor Notes. I believe you're familiar with him, about the general rail situation. But this week I wanted to talk to a rail worker to maybe give folks more of a personal understanding about what's going on the rails. So before we get to some of the issues that y'all have been having, Hugh, you told me that you've been working on the rails for 34 years now, and that it hasn't always been this bad. Is that right?
That is correct. Now, the rail crafts, the operating crafts, we've always been a 24/7 operation. And but we've had enough extra board people, generally speaking, to ensure that everybody can be off, not necessarily when they want to be off, but be off a reasonable amount of time, perhaps. And that they have been tightening the screws on us for the last several years. And during the pandemic, they used as an excuse to lay off, furlough more people who, to their surprise, did not come back when they were called back. So that's really left them in a lurch. And I have to say, as proof, there's a lot of people with 10, 15, even 20 years seniority who have been leaving the industry, abandoning their railroad retirement, and or going to Amtrak, perhaps, to keep it. But they're getting away from the freight rail industry. It's just driving everybody insane.
Switching careers 15 to 20 years in is very, very difficult. That doesn't seem like a normal thing to have to do, and that's not something that's been happening. Usually, or in the past, the rail has been a career that you keep till retirement, right?
That's exactly correct. And we had good living wages. Keep in mind, the wages that we make involve essentially sacrificing our family lifetime to a large extent. And that's why we were always highly paid in the past, but that's in the past. We haven't been highly paid in quite a while. At best, I think these last several agreements we've just treaded water with inflation, and even this agreement does nothing but tread water with regard to inflation. And it's a heck of a decision to make that I've had enough. The pandemic set something off in people that made them realize there's a life other than work, and that the quality time with their family is, I think, become much more important to a lot of people. I don't know what it is about the pandemic, but it's woken workers up.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's such a good thing for people to realize that, dreaming of labor is maybe not is not everything that it's cracked up to be, and that maybe sponsoring your family your whole life, going to work every single day, maybe that's not the best way to live, and so I'm happy to see so many people standing up for themselves and fighting back. Could you talk to us a little bit more about what the situation was like when you started on the rails 34 years ago?
Well, I have to say that I started in 1989. I was a sixth member as a trainee, a switchman trainee. I was a sixth member of a crew. On one tiny butt head, we had an engineer, a fireman, a yard foreman, two helpers, and then myself.
Wow.
That's all gone. We're down to two men on a crew. And they're trying desperately to make it a one-man crew. And the UTU was able to stave that off this go around, at least right away, but it's still going to be a fight property by property.
No doubt.
So anyway,
what about that? That is, even just that is a huge difference. 6-person crews down to now we're at 2-man crews, and the things that you are being the crews of are now significantly larger, longer, and more dangerous. You weren't having 4-mile long trains in 89, right?
That is correct. We were limited to 150 cars, and the trains that were 150 cars long, was not an often, occurrence. A coal train back when I started out was 90 car lengths long. Now it's 147.
Wow.
Incredible tonnages.
So is there any point in your mind that sticks out over, since 89 where something happened and you were like, oh, wow, things are really changing for the worse here?
We had and I'm going to say this is 10, 15 years ago, things really started to change. When I went to work, and I work on Norfolk Southern, everything was geared to moving freight. We were a transportation company. And then we became worried about winning this Harriman Award, which is a safety award. And I'll always remember a superintendent of Inman Yard telling us one day he didn't care if we moved one box car as long as nobody got hurt. And so that was the antithesis of how it was when I first came to work. But there, over the years, and particularly in the last 15, I'm going to say, there's been an anti-labor, almost a hatred by management for us. I don't know why. We're the guys that earn the freight. We're a pittance in cost compared to the profits, the record profits these guys have made, even through the Great Recession and such. And it's been record profits quarter after quarter up till now. And yet we're the enemy. And I don't know why. You would think as you go to fewer and fewer people trying to move more and more freight, you would want to treat those people well. But that's, there's some business philosophy that we're just going to grind everybody, to dust in making profits for our shareholders. And that's not a good long-term strategy.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely not. And I don't understand. Well, I don't understand I can understand the bosses seeing that, because I think that bosses are, it's funny. I was watching this conservative talk radio program at one point, and they were going on about how humble Eric Trump is, unlike all the other small business people who like to fly first class or whatever. But Trump was flying business class. Eric Trump was. Isn't he so down to earth? And I think that really encapsulates there is something that I think poisons your mind when you get into these business type environments, that poisons your mind, makes you think that you're better than other people. But what I don't understand is that other folks fall for it, right? We've got people, we just played last week on the show, Ben Shapiro saying that y'all got the whole store in this tentative agreement. Oh
my God, what a joke.
Yeah. It's a joke, and he was saying that, wow, they got the whole score. They got the whole store, and there are people that believe that. There are people that listen to him that think, wow, yeah, the rail workers, they're spoiled and they're entitled, and they don't deserve what they get. And just normal working people believe, and I don't understand it. I can't understand that mindset of other people. I can understand it from bosses because it's in their interest, but I can't understand it from other people.
Well, and the other people are working 5 days a week. They have a weekend, and they're perfectly happy in their little pathetic lives. And because they don't know, the whole story about the railroad. In a 24/7 environment, when you're on call 24/7, as I am with 35 years seniority, I'm 34 years seniority. I'm waiting on a call right now. To go to work, and I'll be up tonight. I'll take an unknown amount of rest in Chattanooga, and then I'll have to come back and do it again. And I'm doing it on the weekends. I'm doing it on Thanksgiving Day. And above all, I'm doing it often at nighttime, which I can't stand. But that's what you're paying for. Except you're not really paying anything, and you don't have to believe me. Let's just watch if this agreement passes or gets imposed on us. Let's just see how many people leave the industry thereafter. I think there's a lot of people waiting on a back pay check, and then they're out of here. particularly the younger
Well,
people.
so, you went into it some there with the, you're on call right now. Right now, if you get a call, you've got to say, Jake, I've got to go. I got to get on the railroads. That's what we initially had you scheduled for 10:15, and we were like, well, we'll go ahead and bring him in first because he's on call and he might have to leave, and maybe he's going to be gone by 10:15. And you were on call yesterday, and you and then you have been on call since, I believe, 5 a.m. this morning, and you were on the road late last night, and then you're going to be, like you said, on the road tonight, and it's just, and you're on call Thanksgiving and all these holidays. Talk to us some more about what it's been like these last several years when you had to go to the doctor, if you wanted to be with your family, stuff like that.
Okay, so I'm at the high end of the seniority roster, and so I can manipulate. I have to bid in a job every single week, and because I have the seniority, I can bid from one job to other. That's what I did last week. I was actually on a road switcher with a schedule yesterday. I got off at 8 o'clock last night. I went to a pool job at 12 o'clock a.m. I was rested at 7 a.m. and I'm either first or second out right now, waiting on a call. But I can manipulate that bidding system to get off days when I need them for doctor's appointment. But anybody below me, if you go just a little bit below me, they don't have that luxury. They don't stand to move around like I do. So for most people, they're stuck on their job, and you can't. Okay, we have personal leave days. These guys got paid personal leave days. These are days that we're given in lieu of holiday. We don't get holiday pay. If I come to work on Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day or July 4th, I don't get extra money for that. There's no holiday pay. Now in the yard, they get holiday pay. So in lieu of that, I have 13 personal leave days that I'm supposed to be able to take when I want to take them. What really happens is I have to put in a request 48 hours at least in advance to be off, and then somebody has to approve that. And it's often not approved. They look at their slots, if you will, and say, somebody else is going to be off. We're not going to let Hugh Sawyer off. And so, and often they don't respond. Even when you put in these requests months in advance, they don't respond months in advance. It's a last second thing, and you got to call people up and try to get an approval. And it's just driving everybody's insane.
Right.
Particularly the young married.
Last week, the TA was out, but nobody had seen the language yet. We had seen some press releases from some of the unions, from Biden saying that, look at how great this is, from Ben Shapiro saying that you got the whole store right, but nobody had seen the actual language, the contract language, and it's out now. Now people have seen it. Hugh, what is actually in the agreement? How does it comport to what we were told last week in generalities? And what are some things that stick out to you?
Well, all the rumors that we heard, I think, from my standpoint, have come true. And I don't think Ben Shapiro knows how to read, because he obviously did not read the Presidential Emergency Board paper. If he had, he'd know we didn't get the whole enchilada, so to speak. If you'll remember, I think the unions, the rank and file were really pushing the unions on scheduled off days and such. And we have allegedly made progress in that. In this agreement, they're going to assign everybody, poolmen, extra boards, everybody are going to be assigned off days. Okay. Locally, I already have that. And the way that works is, okay, I'm going to be off Tuesday and Wednesday of this upcoming week on the pool job they gave me. Those are assigned off days. And the reality is I'm going to go out Saturday, come back Sunday, go out Monday, probably Monday evening, and come back either Tuesday or Wednesday, probably Wednesday morning. I'll be back in. That's my second off day. And so I can't sit there and say, hey, I'm off Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm going to schedule things for that. I have to sit there and say, nope, I may not be back. Now, they'll give me 48 hours off once I get back, but those weren't scheduled, right? So But I will say that younger guys, you know, the extra boards and what have you, who had no scheduled off days, are thrilled with the thought of getting them. But there was, you know, the holdup was allegedly over 6 days. There are no sick days in this agreement that I have found. If I'm on a board that has no scheduled off days, and keep in mind, this agreement establishes that essentially everybody will be on some sort of board with so-called off days, assigned off days. But if there is a board that doesn't have assigned off days, if they make a doctor's appointment 30 days or more in advance on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, the carriers, as I understand it, will be obligated to let you off for that and have you in place to be off for that. For 3 incidences, up to 3 incidences a year is how they put it. Well, that's not a sick day. Right. We have addressed nothing about when I mark off sick on the weekend and I go to the urgent care and I'm sick, I've got the flu. If I'm off in 90 days, if I'm off more than one weekend day, that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If I'm off for more than one calendar day, I will be put into the attendance program at Norfolk Southern. And if I had, and they literally tell you, we don't care that you have a doctor's note, that you actually went to the doctor, you actually had the flu. We don't care. That's insanity. Mm-hmm. And we have not addressed that. There are no sick days in this agreement, and no way for me to do anything but call down there and say I'm sick and then deal with the consequences after the fact. If I'm hospitalized now in this agreement, if I'm hospitalized or admitted to a hospital, then yeah, they won't count that against me. But you know, who gets hospitalized for the flu or for COVID for that matter? You know?
Yeah, wow. So if you're having a heart attack, maybe they won't discipline you if you're nice.
That is correct.
that's
you know,
just it's just so crazy. That's so far from what's right. And I think what most people, you know, from what most people would expect rail workers to get, and from what most people expect from their employer, it's difficult to, it's difficult to really fathom. And the doctor's appointment stuff, I understand that has to be on doesn't it have to be on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and it has to be scheduled 30 days in advance? Isn't it something like there's several hoops that you have to jump through to be able to use these days?
At least 30 days in advance, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, as long as those aren't holidays, you know, as long as a holiday doesn't fall on that. So in reality, it's not solving the problem for most people. And I just told you how I had doctor's appointments earlier this week, and I was able to manipulate the system to create off days for myself, but most people cannot do that. So, and I don't think the number one thing here that has upset the workers, I don't know if the union's really got a handle of this or not, is the way we're treated. That above all issues, which is not addressed. And now we're going and scheduling. Now we're going to self-sustaining pools. That's where the pools protect themselves. When I mark off on my pool job right now, they have an extra board engineer that will fill it. They'll send that job out and with an extra board engineer, which is what the extra board exists for, by the way. When the regular man marks off, that guy, there's somebody in place to take my place. That's eliminated. My job will just go to the bottom of that pool, and the next guy who was second out will now be first out. If you have 3 or 4 people, if you're 8 times out and you have 3 or 4 people that mark off for whatever reasons, all of a sudden you think you're 8 times out. Hey, I might have time to go to the grocery store or do this or that. Whoops, now you're first out and getting called. And the people that have these chain gangs, that's what they're called in railroad slang. The people that are subjected to them right now are adamant that you do not want this. And that's fine. That's subject to on property negotiation, but they can do it. And we've agreed to go quickly binding arbitration if the general committees can't reach an agreement with the carriers.
So how do you think that workers are responding to this? What is your what's your feel of the pulse among the membership? Do you think that they'll vote this down?
I'm surprised. There's a lot of anger out there, but and keep in mind the union leadership's going to be out there pushing this agreement, saying this is the best you're going to get, guys. And sadly, it might be right, because when by the time we vote on this, which I think the vote will be in by November 15th, after the midterm elections, after at least in the BLE, the national leadership elections, there'll be a vote. If we vote no, okay, then we can go potentially go on strike. But who's going to negotiate a better agreement? Congress will step in, and typically they impose the Presidential Emergency Board recommendations. And I want to remind everybody that on January 2nd, current wisdom is that the Republicans are going to take the House back. So do you want them imposed? They might impose the carrier's desires for all, we know. And so that's the thing. Yeah, there's a lot of anger out there, and I think there's a lot of people planning on voting no. We'll just have to see. But for the next 2 months, we're going to be subjected to, you better vote for this. The fear factor. You got a bird in hand versus what? If you vote no. So it's I'm supposed to say everybody's fired up, and they are. They're very angry over this agreement. They can't believe that nothing that we were angry, the rank and file were angry about, has really been addressed in here. And but they're going to be worked over for at least 2 months to vote for this thing. So we'll see.
As they're being worked over, presumably by people in the bargaining committee. I did see that there was one, I think it was the Machinists, had mentioned in their release that two of the bargaining committee members voted against recommending it to the membership. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
But, as people are trying to cajole them to vote yes, is Railroad Workers United is there going to be an official vote no campaign from Railroad Workers United or this other group that's emerged, Rail Labor Unite, who did some informational picketing last week?
I think so. All indications are that we are going to launch a vote no campaign. We've been waiting on a tentative agreement, which was just fallen into our hands and everybody's hands. And we're not going to wait on the Q&A. What's the point of waiting on the question and answer part of it done by General Chairman in the National? We're weighing the consensus out there, and then we're going to support the rank and file workers and their decision, which I think right now, I have to say, the sentiment out there is vote no.
Well, Hugh, I hope you'll keep us in the loop. I hope you keep us up to date. It was great talking to you. Appreciate your time while you're on call over there in Georgia. Thank you very much. Keep up the fight, and we'll keep in touch.
Okay, Jacob. Thanks for having me on.
All right, brother.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right, so again, that was Hugh Sawyer Jr. Hugh Sawyer Jr., locomotive engineer on Norfolk Southern Railroad, working primarily on the main line between Atlanta and Chattanooga, a member of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, Division 316, a Teamsters affiliate, a rank-and-file member, and a member of Railroad Workers United, an inter-union cross-craft solidarity caucus of railroad workers. We're going to keep in touch with him and see where things go, folks. We'll... I don't know what else to say, but see where things go. It's amazing, the things that working folk have to put up with. It really, really is. And speaking of things that working folk have to put up with, 3 departments with the city of Selma went on strike Wednesday morning. 3 departments with the city of Selma went on strike Wednesday morning, those being the cemetery, public works, and recreation departments. The cemetery department ended their strike on Thursday morning, but as far as I can tell, the other 2 are still on strike as of this morning, Saturday morning. So here's what did they go on strike for, these people working for the city in Selma, Alabama? From the Selma Times-Journal, the City of Selma Public Works Department went on strike Wednesday because of a lack of pay raise to $12 an hour. Amazing. A minimum wage of $12 an hour with a higher minimum wage of $16 an hour for heavy-duty equipment operators. That's the things that working people have to fight for is really just disgusting. The Selma Times-Journal quoted a city councilman irate at the idea that the workers were not happy with the proposed raise of $11 to $11 an hour. Wow. They're asking for 12, we'll give you 11 and you should be happy about it. They're currently working for $9. $9 an hour. That's insane. The Selma Sun quotes a worker talking about the wages she receives now. Quote, $9 an hour. That's not enough to take care of 4 kids in the current economy that we have. I don't see how $9 is enough to take care of an individual person, much less a kid, much less 4 kids.
Right.
$9 an hour. That's not enough to take care of 4 kids in the current economy that we have, Landfill Secretary LaShawn Edwards told Alabama News Network. This is just really, really a really astounding story coming out of Selma last week. We tried to solicit, see if anybody on Twitter that follows us knew any of these people. We couldn't get any contacts, but if you know these folks, would love to talk to them about what they're going through, see how we can support them. But man, it's amazing what they're having to fight for, but also the response. I told you about this city council person, but also listen to this. The Selma Times-Journal asked a local boss, okay, who cares what he thinks, right? I don't care. But the Selma Times-Journal asked a local boss what he thought about these workers who are making $9 an hour, asking for more. Quote, Snow's cleaning service owner, a cleaning service, wonder what he pays his workers, LaMarcus A. Snow, encourages the city council to stand its ground. Selma City Council doesn't need to be bullied by this gesture.
Wow.
Jeez, man.
So the workers who are striking to go from $9 an hour to $12 an hour.
They're bullying the politicians.
They're bullying the public officials.
They're canceling them. I mean, that's just crazy. It's crazy that these people are willing to say these things out loud in the press.
Yeah, I'm curious why they felt the need to interview this guy. Like, breaking news, a capitalist likes to make money.
Right. I don't, that's just.
This just in, bosses don't like it when workers strike.
It's bizarre. It is a bizarre thing. So, there's difficulty in keeping track of stuff like this. In preparing for this segment, I came across another strike by public employees in Alabama that I had not heard about, this time by Lowndes County Highway Department workers striking for a $3 an hour raise. I can't find any more context on that. Nothing that I could find gave me any more context to that dispute, nor could I find an update to that strike, which began on September 14th. So Lowndes County Highway Department workers went on strike on September the 14th, a week and a half ago, and I can't find any update on it anywhere online. Is it still going? Did it get resolved? Did they get the raise? Were they fired? I have no idea. It's not easily accessible. So, we're gonna try to keep track of the Selma strike, maybe see if we can figure out what the resolution, because I was preparing this yesterday, and that yesterday is when I came across the Lowndes County thing. So, we're going to see if we can keep track of this Selma strike, see if we can keep track of what happened in Lowndes County, because that's an interesting story too. And we're going to see if we can bring you an update next week. But, I think that this really highlights the importance of having more worker-focused news, like the Real News Network. I think, there are a lot of outlets that are really, really good for left-wing worker-focused analysis and commentary. I think to a large part, that's kind of where we fall. We're analysis and commentary. Occasionally, we'll bring you news-type stories, but mostly we're analysis and commentary and education. But there's really, really just an absence of outlets who are devoted to covering workers. And I think the Real News Network does a really good job doing that on a national scale. We're going to be talking to Mel Buer in overtime about a really undercovered strike in Iowa at Case New Holland. So she's doing a great job over at the Real News, but we just don't have anything like that in Alabama. My pie in the sky dream, right, would be to expand this project into a total statewide multimedia news outlet with full-time staff dedicated to, the things that we do now, lifting up worker stories, exposing misdeeds of bosses, educating working people, but we don't have the money for that. So donate to TVLR.fm, TVLR.fm/donate. And if you do value seriously, that would help. But seriously, also, the Real News does that kind of stuff at a national scale. So if you're not a supporter of the Real News, I would recommend doing that. They're one of the few places that I donate to, and it is because of that, because they're one of the few outlets that will send people out to cover what working people are doing across the country. So
absolutely,
donate to the Valley Labor Report, donate to the Real News Network.
I just want to second that real quick, and I also wanted to say that we've seen such a decline in journalism across the country, and I think even more pronounced here in Alabama. Mm-hmm. Where so few communities actually have daily newspapers anymore.
Yeah.
There's AL.com, and that's certainly far from perfect, and we'll get into some more of that later. But
yeah,
there's Alabama Political Reporter that's doing a lot of work. But then you have, the right-wing rags like Yellowhammer and 1819 News. And then if you're in a bigger area, you might have the TV news stations, but there's just not a lot of journalism happening inside the state of Alabama on these stories.
How do you not give an update to a story about Lowndes County public employees going on strike? Like how does the same news outlet not give you the resolution of that story? How is that possible?
Yeah, it seems like a big deal.
That's bizarre.
And Lowndes County is a very small population there, so I'm sure everybody in Lowndes County has some idea of what's going on and has some kind of connection to one side or the other of that strike.
Yeah. Totally wild. We have one more update, and then we're going to be going to John Glenn from the Alabama Political Reporter about a potential prison strike. But this update on the UMWA Warrior Met strike down in Brookwood that I wanted to make sure that I gave y'all. A couple weeks ago, we informed you that Warrior Met was trying to make the UMWA pay $13 million for, quote, damages incurred over the course of the strike, which included lost production. It's amazing that they even tried to pitch that.
Yeah, that was mind-blowing that they even put that out there on the table.
Totally mind-blowing. They had in this expense report costs incurred before the strike even began. Costs incurred before the strike even began for increased security and things like this. And so, and this came about because back in June, the UMWA and Warrior Met came to a deal, a settlement, where in principle the UMWA agreed to some damages, which they were quoted at $400,000 for things that were actually damaged over the course of the strike, that had been damaged over the course of the strike. But also not even as much admitting guilt as much as they wanted to not subject their members and their members' family to hours of questioning by company lawyers. And that makes sense to me.
It did to me too. I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, on one level, it's kind of BS. They're having to pay anything at all. But I understand the calculus there.
Yeah, $400,000 and you make it go away. In the grand scheme of things,
if that saves a lot of,
a lot of time, resources, and heartache, then that's fine, and that's what the union wanted to do. But that's what they were quoted. Then Warrior Met came back and was like, actually, you know what? We think it's $13 million.
Totally absurd.
Absurd. Well, the update is that the NLRB came out with their independent estimate. Region 10 came out with their independent estimate last week, pegging it at $435,000, which was in line with the initial estimate. So the UMWA has come out and said we are ready to pay this and move forward. I have not seen if Warrior Met is going to accept that or if they are going to take it to an administrative law judge, because remember, like we said last time, the next step in this process, if the parties did not agree, would be to appeal it to an administrative law judge and get a ruling there. But if both parties agree on the payment, which is now pegged at $435,000 by NLRB Region 10, they can pay it right now and move forward. So that's what the union is prepared to do. We'll let you know what Warrior Met does in the coming weeks, but that is a very good update and a good job by the NLRB Region 10. We appreciate their independent analysis and their disagreement with the absurd request for workers to pay for lost production over the course of a strike.
Absolutely, yeah. So glad to get a little bit of good news there. Just a reminder, you can still donate to the strike fund and to the strike pantry through UMWA. Really encourage folks to do that if you haven't done that in a while. These folks have been out on strike since April 1st, 2021. And right now, there's no real updates as far as I know in terms of the contract itself. Last updates we received is that Warrior Met was pushing the union to agree that a few dozen of its members would be terminated as part of settling this strike. Wouldn't say which ones, wouldn't say why, what they did, which is just also completely absurd because, I presume I haven't looked at their contract, but presumably it's like any other where there is a process to terminate employees that's already in place. And so if Warrior Met has some evidence that some people did something wrong that rises to the level of termination, then let them go through the process. But to try to strong arm the union into sacrificing a few dozen of their members before even getting a contract is just incredibly damaging to morale, I would imagine, but also just an egregious practice, a bad faith practice on part of the company, which is no surprise.
No surprise. Yeah. So next up, Selma workers, mine workers, Lowndes County workers, they're not the only Alabamians that are going on strike or considering using the strike weapon. Incarcerated workers in Alabama are as well. John Glenn wrote a report about this potential prison strike in Alabama for the Alabama Political Reporter, and he joins us now to talk about that. John, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Absolutely. So before we get into the potential prison strike, can you expand on some of the conditions that these workers, these prisoners, are running up against right now in Alabama prisons?
Of course. It's the same conditions that incarcerated individuals and folks aware of the situation within Alabama's correctional system have been speaking about for years now, and that being the increasing violence between incarcerated individuals, the inhumane and unconstitutional treatment by correctional staff, the rampant narcotic use that the ADOC is presently incapable of preventing, the deterioration of physical prison structures, meaning the overcrowding, the actual buildings that these folks are housed in, and again, the death on a scale that the majority of individuals in the state seem really not to fully grasp. I mean, it's important to note that these individuals inside the prison are striking due to these general conditions on top of the working conditions that they face. And something that I've heard in conversations with folks is that this lack of proper incentives to rehabilitate themselves and better themselves while in prison, which is the point, that's the primary reason that this general strike, or this strike within the prisons, and this protests, this sit down and protests outside of the prison are happening. I mean, when you speak directly about the working conditions for those who have jobs in prisons, I mean, they are practically the same as the ones that they face outside of the work environment. And, you know, think about these prisons. They don't have air conditioning. These work areas are dangerous. Most facilities have rodents or some sort of infestation. They lack correctional staff at a level that is I haven't seen, and I doubt that other people have seen in recent years. And so these are the conditions that they're facing. And it's the reasoning behind, at least in conversations with folks that I've spoken with, behind going forward this strike.
Yeah, and like I mentioned when we spoke to Eddie Burkhalter, formerly with the Alabama Political Reporter and the Anniston Star, currently with Alabama Appleseed, you know, these 90-some-odd% of people in Alabama prisons are going to be reintroduced to the public. And not only is that a fact of the matter, that is what most people would want. Most people do not want people locked in cages for the rest of their lives, even for some violent crimes. You beat somebody up, even you shoot somebody in the leg, you rob somebody. Nobody thinks that even these things that are violent and despicable, and certainly we should condemn them, and we should you know, encourage people not to do them, where you shouldn't shoot people. But even these things, we don't want people locked up for the rest of their lives. So that's a fact of the matter. That's what the people want. And so the question is, what are our prisons going to look like? Are they going to actually be facilities for rehabilitation and reintroduction into society? Or are they going to be places where abuse happens, places where people are functionally tortured, places where people are raped, places where people get addicted to drugs, get involved in gang activities? And the fact of the matter is that these things are all more representative of the reality of Alabama prisons than the ideal of them being places for rehabilitation. Is that an accurate summary in your opinion, John?
I mean, yes, more or less. I mean, understand that, like, in my work with this particular beat that I cover, which I've only been covering since basically Eddie left APR. It's amazing to me to see how horrible it is, the conditions within these prisons, and then like the lack of response that you have outside of the prisons. I mean, the word being thrown around is sadistic. It can be considered sadistic, what these incarcerated individuals are experiencing, and how powers that be are allowing these conditions to persist. Yeah.
What kind of work do these incarcerated workers do?
Well, it's everything from working in the kitchens to maintenance to running the stores to cutting the grass to cutting people's hair to I guess more cliched stuff that we assume incarcerated folks just do in prisons, being that, you know, manufacturing of license plates, furniture. There's also, I believe at the women's facility, they make clothing and things of that nature. I mean, these, with the jobs inside of the prisons, again, like working in the kitchen, maintenance, those are highly essential jobs that without these incarcerated individuals, the ADOC couldn't get done, and they lack the correctional staff to staff those particular jobs in the event that folks walk away from their jobs on Monday, which is supposed to be the beginning of this strike, if it is to happen. So that's kind of the scope of what they do. It's not limited to that, but that's more or less some of the examples of what they do in prison.
And this isn't the first time that incarcerated workers in Alabama prisons have gone on strike. We actually spoke about one a couple of years ago and the very beginning of the program. And can you tell us how have what has the success been in these former prison strikes? I think at one point I read an article from 2016 or 2017 that alleged that some of the correction staff actually joined the prisoners in these strikes, or in one of these strikes back in 2016, 2017. I haven't been able to confirm that. But what has there been any success, if any, and what have been the ramifications for workers, for prisoners, for incarcerated workers that have gone on strike in the past?
Well, if those strikes were successful, I don't believe it's been seen yet, because one of the consistent things that they have been protesting is I believe it's within the Alabama Constitution. It's the section that mirrors the 13th Amendment, which, of course, it outlaws slavery, indentured servitude, except in cases of working of people that are that this servitude is a punishment for a crime. Those things still exist, and the conditions still exist. If they have been successful, I don't think we've seen the fruits of that success yet. But you mentioned about the ramifications that some individuals may face if they go on strike on Monday, based on the previous reactions from the ADOC, from correctional staff. They've faced everything from alleged denying of meals or delaying of meals to being locked into segregated cells, which are otherwise, that's solitary confinement in layman term. For years, this was the case of Robert Earl, who's one of the better known prison organizers, who helped begin that worker strike in 2016. It began on May Day of 2016. It was the largest in U.S. history. And during that particular strike, as well as those that have happened after that, you have instances of threats of excessive violence from correctional staff, or actual instances of excessive violence from correctional staff, which is commonplace enough in Alabama's correctional system. Most recent example from January of 2021, as reported in the Montgomery Advertiser, there was a hunger strike that happened among incarcerated individuals at Kilby. And at least one of those individuals alleges that he was beaten as a result of that participation in the hunger strike at Kilby by a correctional guard. And in conversations with folks that I've had, it seems that the retaliation for this current organizing effort is happening as we speak. I was speaking to one of the folks organizing the protest that's happening in conjunction with the beginning of the strike on Monday. It's supposed to happen outside of the ADOC building Monday morning. One of the organizers was speaking to me and said that her husband, who is an incarcerated individual inside of a state prison, was locked into solitary confinement somewhat recently in an act of apparent retaliation for her efforts outside organizing this protest. So it affects people inside and outside, and so that's basically it.
Is it I think I know the answer to this, but is it legal for the corrections facility to throw people in solitary confinement for protesting? Is it legal for them to beat them?
Well, I can't strictly speak to the legality of things. I'm not a lawyer. I have a very peripheral knowledge of the norms and the regulations of what correctional officers are allowed to do. But I will say, I mean, things like denial of meals is directly illegal. That's a violation of statutes mandating that you have to feed individuals in prison. The First Amendment protects incarcerated individuals' right to speech in a certain sense. It's limited, particularly when it comes to correspondence and things. And in those Supreme Court precedents, essentially what it is it's instances where the integrity of the correctional facility could be compromised by free speech by these incarcerated individuals, and so that's how it's limited. But things like communications to the outside world, particularly of a legal matter, are protected, I believe. Again, I can only speak to this as someone who covers this. I'm not a lawyer in any way, shape, or form. I was hearing from an individual at Limestone Correctional Facility who was speaking to me about the organizing efforts up there, and said that the warden apparently, and I can't get this confirmed, but apparently has threatened to take away their tablets. They have these state issued tablets where they can download music, play apps. It's just a normal like iPad looking thing. And that's also a way for them to communicate with individuals outside, right? They have an email service on there that they use. And so there might be an argument that something like taking away those tablets would be considered unconstitutional, since, a certain amount of their communication is protected. But I can't speak as an expert on that particular instance. Something else that he was telling me was that apparently that there is some talks that the warden may delay their chow time or take away their meals, which is a violation. But it's important to note that the individuals working in those kitchens are incarcerated folks themselves, and so if they go on strike, it's obvious that there won't be food, simply because those folks who would prepare that food they're not working; they're on strike.
Right.
And I think he was mentioning to me. This was somewhat recently. He said that they've started making sandwiches in preparation for folks walking away from the kitchen. And so I'm imagining there's food stockpiled, but I again can't speak to that all unconfirmed, but it's just what I've been told by individuals who spoke with me.
And have any officers, to your knowledge, faced any discipline for their alleged role in any of this retaliation?
I'm sure that it's happened in the past for instances of just blatantly egregious acts that simply can't go unnoticed by the powers that be. But I mean, I'm not aware, frankly, and that just it's a product of me only covering this for so long. I was not in media in this state, at least in 2018, when the latest strike happened at this scale. But I mean, the most recent example I mentioned from 2021, where the fellow at Kilby was allegedly beaten by correctional staff for his role in the hunger strike that was happening there. I remember reading that a spokesman for the ADOC told the Montgomery Advertiser that there was an investigation ongoing. Whether or not that individual was reprimanded, suspended, I have no knowledge of that. I'm sure it's happened, but again, I have no knowledge of that.
So, I think this is some pretty good groundwork that we've set. Coming to the present, in your article on Wednesday, you mentioned that the cohesiveness of this organization that's going to be that's pushing the strike that you said is supposed to happen on Monday now. That remains to be seen. Have you been able to, since Wednesday, figure out the seriousness of this strike threat? Does it seem to be reasonable to assume that this is going to go forward on Monday?
Yes, at this moment, it seems reasonable in conversations, again, that I've had with individuals since Wednesday, that this is going to happen starting on midnight Monday. And the the incohesiveness that I was mentioning in that particular article is based on a couple of conversations that I had where people would be talking about the different agendas that came up, usually around social media groups, prison advocacy groups, and things like that, that include things that aren't on the official list of demands. And it's also important to note, again, that they haven't been officially released yet. They are most likely still working on their final codified list of demands, list of agendas. But different things like, I remember seeing that one that had the repeal of the drive-by statutes, and a more streamlined process for furloughs, medical furloughs, and review of elderly folks that are in our correctional facilities. So it's not like these demands aren't necessarily inconsistent with the ones that I have already been told about, the ones that I've been able to see. They're just increasing the scope of things, and it appears, at least, that the organizing folks, again from conversations that I have, are trying to limit it to a more direct and how would one say, they're essentially trying, like, they have their list of agenda. Yeah. That way, that when it does come time to negotiate and discuss these things, it's obvious that their side of things isn't illogical, and it isn't. It's not. It's rational, because basically what, again, they're arguing for is more humane and constitutional treatment within the prisons. I mean, that's the base of this. And
have you seen any response from lawmakers or people within the ADOC to these plans? Have you seen any indication that the people with the power to meet these demands are moving towards what the prisoners are asking for?
I haven't personally. I have no idea if anyone, particularly in the Alabama state legislature, is even aware of this or has any plans to act on this, because it's also, again, most of what they're asking for is repealing of certain laws, be they the Habitual Offender Act, and that would have to take place in the state legislature. There's only so much the ADOC can do with that, and whether or not the ADOC is either taking this seriously or is aware of this also remains to be seen. But I'm sure that they're somewhat aware of this at the present moment. But I haven't seen any indication of movement by the powers that be, frankly, at the moment. But we'll have to see Monday, which is, again, that's when it's supposed to happen.
John Glenn, reporter at the Alabama Political Reporter, we appreciate your time on this. This is a very interesting, important thing that folks in Alabama are going through. Thanks.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, folks. We appreciate you. We appreciate you listening. We are going to go to a break, and then we're going to come back and talk about some local North Alabama Huntsville news. So you're not going to want to go anywhere. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. We have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about our work advocating for customers and join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or DSANorthAlabama@gmail.com for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Almost only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Adam Keller. My co-host is Jacob Morrison. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. We've got some good stuff. We've got David pointed out in the chat, in the YouTube chat, that you can donate through YouTube as well. You can donate through YouTube as well now. I just set that up last week. So that is a new feature. We've got super chats enabled. Strom McCallum sends a super chat. Solidarity from South Carolina. William Pinas sends Teamster from California, that's where he's from, sends us $2 as well. And yeah, so we appreciate everybody hanging out in the chat. Jeb is here. Infinite Content is here. We've got Jared. And Jared, I saw your message telling the guest that you appreciate his NASA hat as a NASA union member, but I just forgot about it while I was talking to him. So
we've had a lot going on this morning.
We've had a lot going on. A lot of gremlins. A lot
Absolutely.
of gremlins in
it's a miracle we've pulled off as much as we have.
Honestly, I feel pretty good about where we're at. What we've been able to pull off with all these gremlins in the stuff in the lines.
Very thankful to Ben from Spice Radio.
He's doing a great
if it
job.
Wouldn't have been, we would not be on the air today.
Yeah. Mel, Joe, and James in the Facebook chat. We appreciate y'all joining us as well. James, as one of the striking miners in Brookwood, I want to say I appreciate all y'all do. Love the show. Thank you very much, James. There is no higher compliment, no higher compliment than a compliment from a striking coal miner in Alabama. That's basically who we do the thing for, Alabama workers. So we appreciate it. So we wanted to talk about in the last 10 minutes of this show that, we had a school board race come to a conclusion last week. Adam, what's your take? What's your take about the school board?
Sure. So if you've been listening lately, you know we've been covering the Huntsville City elections. The first round was in August 23rd, and we just had a runoff Tuesday, September 20th. We did interview the winning candidate, Andrea Alvarez, and also did a segment, I believe week before, doing a little deep dive on Angela McClure, who was the completely bonkers right-wing candidate for that position. So the final results, I'll just give you the city council. David Little won 63% in District 2 city council runoff to Bill Yell's 37%. Yell positioned himself as the conservative candidate. So interestingly enough, Andrea Alvarez also won 37% to 63%. So Andrea Alvarez and David Little both getting 63% of the vote in the runoff. Both of those would have been the less reactionary candidates. I don't want to go so far as to call them the progressive candidates because I don't necessarily think either of those would embrace that label. But that's interesting in local turnout that, the progressive community was able to defeat the far right candidates trying to take over local government. And in the school board race, it did get pretty ugly, especially towards the end. Angela McClure, who, as we reported on, is completely bonkers and is a right-wing extremist who is connected to Casey Wardynski, reportedly connected to the Mo Brooks family as well. She got a lot of outside help there at the end. Republican PACs were sending out text blasts. They had set up some fishy website that looked as if it was a school district website. It really wasn't. They got really, down and dirty with some of their campaigning at the end. And the thing is, and I believe Andrea would agree with me here, that the rhetoric coming from the far right in this little school board race for Huntsville City Schools really helped win the seat for Andrea Alvarez. Because there were plenty of people who were non-political or who are themselves Republican who were so turned off by A, the craziness, and B, the right-wing extremism of the Angela McClure campaign. And that's something that I think has been lost in a little bit of the reporting after the election from AL.com. And interestingly enough, I think the big piece from, I believe her name is Rebecca Griesbach, she wrote an article the day after the election, and it's gotten a lot of traction in right-wing media. Jacob forced me to listen to a little bit of Dale Jackson and Jeff Poore and some other right-wing dude where they were ranting and raving about this article. And I actually have objections to the article, but from a very different point of view.
Yeah, well, Adam, the funny thing, and I've got this graphic up on the screen now, the coverage is just so it's divorced from what's going on the ground, what went on the ground, because and it's funny, they changed the headline because
they did.
It
was such cheap clickbait.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull up what was the initial headline. Let me see if I can find that. It was let's see, Alvarez wins bitter Huntsville school board race, semicolon, compared Republicans to parasites. Wow, that's an interesting title. Now the title is Bitter Huntsville School Board Race Decided in a Runoff Election. That's much more.
Yeah, they've toned it down a lot.
But the quote is still there, and the quote, is it just quoting that, it makes it sound maybe more salacious than it is, but I'll read it to you. Quote, "It's highly strange," unquote, Alvarez said of McClure's campaign shortly before Election Day. "It is definitely for political gain. It is definitely for the Republicans to parasite off of our school board election, to make them look good so they, quote, gain a seat, I guess. And that is why they are trying to make it so partisan." And then Griesbach goes on to note that North Alabama voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump in the general election, but in Huntsville, the margin was much narrower, according to election data. So Griesbach is not only quoting this, she not only had the article, but then she's adding this context to try to make it like McClure, or trying to make it like Alvarez, is saying that rank-and-file Republicans are parasites, when clearly what is being said is that apparatchiks of the Republican Party are trying to parasite off of the school board race, which is nonpartisan, which is generally divorced from these national political issues, but they're trying to make use of the national political climate against teachers, against public education, to gain a seat and get a Republican apparatchik in the seat. And it's clear that that's what Alvarez is saying, but the quoting that without that context, adding the additional context to try to put in that narrative about Alvarez and the initial headline, it's just absurd. And then, of course, you've got Dale going on this acting like that's the thing, acting like that is actually true.
Right. It was a complete distortion of reality, what we heard on right-wing radio. Because, first of all, they portray it as if Alvarez called Republicans parasites. She did not. And they also pretended as if it was Alvarez and or the Democrats who they associate together falsely, as if it was they who politicized the school board race, and that is not true. And they also want to portray it as if Alvarez was like some sort of Manchurian candidate for the left, that she was hiding her true progressive credentials during the election, and AL.com was in the tank for her by waiting until Wednesday after the election to publish, her true thoughts, all of which is total BS. And it's, pretty sad that folks will listen to that and get a completely distorted picture of the Huntsville school board election. And it's frustrating as well that, AO.com frankly didn't do a lot better. It's better, but not complete. She missed the mark a little bit, I think. The clickbait headline was a big problem right off the bat. They've since changed that a little bit. But in the text of that article, what stood out to me is there's no mention that Angela McClure was one of three candidates, one of three right-wing extremists, a part of a slate that was running for every school board seat. There's no mention that she was backed by Casey Wardynski, the former superintendent of Huntsville City Schools, who's still a lightning rod for Huntsville City Schools discussions, who was a failed congressional candidate just a couple of months ago, the same election in which Angela McClure ran for State House and was trounced there as well. There's no mention of McClure's possible connections to the Mo Brooks family or the rest of this far-right infrastructure, which frankly would have proven the author's point that it seemed to me she was trying to make the point that it was the far-right flank of the Republican Party was politicizing these local school board elections. And she quotes a few academics to support that. But frankly, her case would have been a lot stronger had she included some of these really big details about not just the theoretical aspect of it, but how it was put into practice right here in Huntsville.
And AL.com did a follow-up article that I've got on the screen now, where they quote city council person, right-wing city council person Jenny Robinson. And then they also quote McClure saying that, quote, they brought politics. McClure, the right-wing weirdo, saying they brought politics into the schools. They brought wokeism into the schools, and we know it and we see it as parents without, and there's nothing in this follow-up article about the objective reality that it is McClure and this other slate of Wardinsky-backed people who are bringing the partisan nature. They're the ones that are doing this partisan thing.
Right. Alvarez wanted to talk about teacher retention, community partnerships, transparency of the school board, and McClure and these other folks wanted to talk about whatever the hot button issues of the day or of the week were on Newsmax and Breitbart and Fox News. You know, they wanted to talk about pronouns. And I couldn't help but laugh when, Angela McClure proclaimed they were going to stop pronouns in Huntsville City Schools. The teacher in me couldn't help but laugh that obviously that's not going to help your English proficiency. Right. Coming next, adverbs. Watch out, children. But it was a lot of false equivalents in that AO.com article because I think it really undersells the extent to which McClure herself was a completely bonkers person who is not fit for public office. And if you listen to the segment I did a couple weeks ago, you would understand why. And believe me when I tell you, that was the sanitized for radio version.
Yeah.
There was a lot there that I could have said that I didn't say for fear of, getting too far ahead of myself. But anyone who paid any attention to that campaign could see that is not a person fit to be a substitute teacher, much less a school board candidate.
And that's where we're going to leave it off with the radio, folks. If you enjoy what you hear, you can find us online for a whole second half of the program that we call Overtime, where we're going to be talking about anime union busting. We're going to be talking about union busters shaking in their boots about the new labor upsurge with a labor reporter from the Huffington Post. We're going to be talking about some September labor history, and we'll be talking to new associate editor of The Real News, I forgot to mention that, Mel Buer, about the Case New Holland strike. So, folks, stay tuned. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. All power to the workers. Okay. Forward to it. First up, we're going to have Dave Jameson.
Yeah, I love his work. It's been really cool to see some of his reporting with the Huffington Post, and it's great that he's going to be on today.
Yep, really looking forward to it. So we're going to talk to him as soon as we get back, but we're going to take a break really quick, and we will be back for Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Welcome back, folks. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sticking in despite our technical difficulties this morning. We do appreciate you. Looking forward to our overtime we have scheduled this morning.
Yeah, so like Adam said, appreciate you hanging out with us. You're still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio program. We're now in overtime, and we've got a good show for you. We've got Dave Jamieson from the Huffington Post talking about this Littler Mendelsohn report. We've got Mel Buer talking about the Case New Holland strike in Iowa. So going to be some good stuff. So yeah, our first segment for overtime is we're going to bring Dave Jamieson on. Dave Jamieson is a labor reporter for the Huffington Post, and he subjected himself to union avoidance law firm Littler Mendelson's annual Labor Day report. And so he's going to come on and he's going to tell us all about it. Dave, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Taking the time from a family camping trip. Is that right?
Yeah, taking the boys camping later today, but we're not pushing off for another hour, so I'm good to go. Glad, appreciate the invite. Glad to be here, and I read the Littler stuff, so you don't have to.
There you go. And I assure you, I did not. So I'm going to be totally relying on your take for it.
Yeah, it's so they do this annual Labor Day report, and you got to keep in mind it's partly a marketing document, right? I mean, they're one of the big union avoidance law firms, and like the others, are always trying to drum up customers. And so you got to take that with a grain of salt. But overall, honestly, it's a pretty helpful report. It kind of runs through the state of the economy for workers right now, and it goes through the changes we're seeing legally and politically right now when it comes to labor law. So this is coming from Littler, not from me. They say that we could be on the cusp of what they say has the potential to be one of the most pro-union eras in modern history. And of course, if you're a union avoidance law firm, that has the potential to bring a lot of business. That phrase could certainly spook a lot of in-house counsel at a lot of companies that are facing union drives. But I think it's accurate too, when you look at sort of the way the winds have shifted and the ways that things are favorable right now to organizing. One is economic. We got this tight labor market, some bargaining power shifting back to workers, but also, politically, legally, we got a Democrat in the White House who's made important changes at the labor board. They're making changes that are more favorable to organizing. And so I think this is a moment for unions right now, and we don't know how long this window will be open, and so they got to make the most of it. And I think that's partly what Littler was saying.
Yeah, well, so you mentioned that this is almost kind of a marketing report. Who is the presumably labor reporters for the Huffington Post, union activists? We're not the target audience, right? Who is the target audience? Who gets this in their email or in their mailbox? Who are the people that this is made for?
This is for employers, right? And probably in particular the lawyers inside employers who. Littler is a company that you go to when you are facing an organizing campaign or you're going to have to bargain a contract. Most companies, if they have in-house labor counsel, most of them are probably not really well equipped to kind of handle an organizing campaign, or if they want to beat it back, of course. Anyone can just remain neutral and bargain with workers. Of course, that's not how it goes with most employers. A lot of them are going to reach for a law firm like Littler. So a document like this is to give employers the rundown and to say, hey, Littler knows what's going on. We got to read on things. If you got workers if you catch something as a drift among your workers, you call us because we're the kind of law firm that's going to help you beat this stuff.
What are the so do they in this report, do they also advertise the type of services that they would offer to employers who are wanting to, beat down uppity workers?
Sure. So what they do in the parts that and granted, this is a big management side law firm that deals with all factors of labor law, whether it's, minimum wage and overtime or discrimination, EEOC. So they address all of that stuff. But as it relates to unions, what they do is they run through the different cases that we might see shifting. The NLRB has a very aggressive general counsel right now, Jennifer Abruzzo. She's pushing through a lot of pro-union changes right now. And what firms like Littler do, and they do this in this document, they also do it on their websites. Morgan Lewis, all these anti-union firms do this. They sort of, break down changes or possible changes to the law. And, there's kind of an insinuation there like, hey, employer, you should be a little concerned about this, right? And maybe you're going to want, one of our partners to talk to about these concerning changes. So, of course, they get into the legal landscape and how it's shifting and sort of cast that as a reason for concern for employers. Again, this is partly a marketing document, and the law firms, they do this with their own blogs too all the time. When you're searching things about organizing, you often just kind of land on these obscure blogs run by union avoidance law firms.
And one of the things that they mention, in addition to the shifting legal landscape, they said that, and this is from your tweet, Littler says the top-down approach to union organizing has, quote, flipped entirely, moving in a less predictable grassroots direction. And I can't tell if, and I can't remember the picture that you screen capped, but you said this new paradigm may be confusing for new employers, so you may want to consider seeking the advice of outside counsel. I thought
that was me talking, not Littler, but I was sort of characterizing what I think they were trying to get at. This is, I think that what you described there from the report, this shift from top down to grassroots, I think that's something that both Littler and union activists would agree on, that we're seeing right now. We see it in kind of these independent efforts that are popping up. Just the one this past week was at Home Depot in Philadelphia. A guy there submitted over 100 cards, not affiliated with a union. I talked to them yesterday. Hasn't really been in talks about affiliating. Of course, they haven't won an election yet, but this is the kind of thing that Littler's talking about, and that we're really seeing a lot. And so that's one reason the Starbucks campaign has been so successful. Of course, that's a part of Workers United, which is part of SEIU. So it's not like this totally independent thing, but that's been a very grassroots campaign. I mean, just basically run by the baristas. And I think that's one reason it's been so successful. And so, that's what Littler is saying here. Like Joe Blow, whether you're at a Fortune 500 that's non-union for now, or whether you run a small company out there or you franchise a few places, you should be worried because workers are agitating right now, and they're doing it on their own. What Littler said, and I think this is correct in part. They're saying that traditionally, the unions go and do the knocking and try to get workers to start an organizing campaign. They're saying it's kind of the opposite right now. Workers are either doing it on their own or they're actively seeking out unions. And of course, it's always been a mix of both, right? But I think kind of the latter category is really, really popping right now, where we have somebody submit, a viable petition for a Home Depot store, and basically, no established unions even know about it. So that's kind of the terrain we're in right now. And it's, I think, partly why people find it like a really interesting and exciting time.
And so what do you think do you think that this will be effective for Littler in drumming up, because you said this is kind of primarily going to be a marketing document. So is their goal to get employers to preemptively seek their counsel and do union busting meetings before a union even comes in?
Yeah, I think Littler would probably recommend that, and they want to be out there as one of the best known firms in this field, and of course they are. They've become sort of the only firm that sort of regular people might have heard of in this field, and that's because of the Starbucks campaign, right? Those of us who track this stuff, whether journalists or union activists or lawyers, they sort of know who the big firms are. But Littler is a little unique in that they've got offices all over the place, right? They're a bigger firm than than a Morgan Lewis, which is another really well-known union avoidance firm. And I think sort of the network that Littler has and their reach is a big reason that, Starbucks maybe went with them, because Starbucks is dealing with this campaign that's percolating all over the country. And so Littler, I haven't looked at how many lawyers from Littler have been working on the Starbucks campaign lately, but early on, I was going through the filings and there was more than 3 dozen, and this was early this year. Wouldn't be surprised if it was over 100 at this point that have been working on filings. And that's an enormous amount of paperwork. It's an enormous amount of money for a firm like Littler, and it's a huge amount even for Starbucks to be spending. This is an exciting time for unions. I think it's an exciting time for the union avoidance firms too, right? I mean, this is a moment for them. They've got employers that are scared, employers that have never had to deal with unions, employers that have never really faced a viable organizing campaign, and certainly never had to bargain a first contract. Now they're spooked about that, right? I mean, Microsoft recently came out with a statement saying they were kind of like opening the door to neutrality, and what they said was they acknowledged this is coming for us and basically everybody, and so that's the route we're going to go. Other companies are going to take a different tack, and they're going to lean on law firms like Littler. They're going to lean on union avoidance consulting firms that bring the consultants in who are not lawyers usually, but they're going to deliver the scary message. They're going to do the captive audience meetings. This should be a bonanza for that world right now as well.
You mentioned that you think it'll be a bonanza, but I wonder about that, because like you just said, Microsoft is moving towards the direction of at least initial neutrality. They are not. It's not looking like they're making plans to hire union avoidance law firms. And Starbucks Workers United quote tweeted your tweet saying something like, hire Littler Mendelsohn so that you too can lose 80% of your union elections. Do you think that maybe some people will see this report or see this report in conjunction with seeing everything else that we're seeing and come to the conclusion that it might be better for them just to accept defeat as far as there's going to be a union here? I'm going to just try to get the best deal that I can with a unionized workforce. What do you think the balance is going to be there?
I think there's going to be some of those, but they will certainly be outliers. That's not how most employers respond, and employers just go to incredible lengths to try to keep a union out. I mean, even after years of covering this, I'm continually surprised of how far they're willing to go. And I in talking with a management side lawyer who is really in the trenches on this stuff, he once told me, basically, no matter what you think of a company, their morals go out the window when a union comes knocking. So I don't expect that to change. And I don't, this is I think a real moment of opportunity for unions, but keep in mind, I mean, the union density is so low still. We're talking still 6% in the private sector. Even making headway on that, union firms are still going to be really probably in a small minority. So I don't see that changing. I don't see companies' calculations changing. And Littler, they lost. This. I think they've really the union campaign has really beaten them up at Starbucks. I mean, obviously, if your whole strategy was to contain this thing, it's been a failure. But this is a long road here. They've got around not yet 300 stores out of 9,000 unionized, and it's going to be a brutal contract fight. It already is. Starbucks, I'm sure, is willing to starve them out. They're going to take this as far as they can in holding back on a decent contract. And so, even where workers are winning, there's like a really, really long fight ahead of them. And the union avoidance industry, this part of the legal world and the consulting world, it's a big piece of that.
Dave, I appreciate you reading union busting attorneys' reports so that we don't have to, and for coming and telling us about it. Where can folks find your work?
I just go to HuffPost or check me out on Twitter. Handle's Jameson, Jamieson. And thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for the work that you do, and hope you have fun camping this weekend.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. You definitely recommend checking out Dave Jamison's work. Really good. One of the good ones.
Oh, yeah. Definitely one of the most important labor reporters right now that you need to be following if you want to know what's happening.
Yeah. So, Adam, you've got some labor history, some September labor history for us. So what happened in labor history in September?
Oh, yeah. September 2022. Let's do a little bit of labor history. Some important anniversaries in labor history. As you can see, I'm rocking my United Farm Workers shirt today, which will come up here in a sec. I do want to give a shout out again to Planning to Change the World, a plan book for social justice educators, the 2022-23 edition. That gave me some inspiration and a lot of the material for this segment. And it's something we're going to incorporate moving forward, I believe. Make sure we did this last month. Want to make sure we're incorporating some labor history into our program. So shout out to Planning to Change the World. That's from Education for Liberation Network. And Labor Notes and Zen Education Project were also very helpful sources as I compiled this. So let's get started with September 1st. That was the 100th anniversary of the Daughtry Injunction. Railroad workers revolted against a 12% wage cut. Nearly 400,000 workers walked off the job in July 1922. Pennsylvania Railroad President Samuel Ray hired more than 16,000 armed men to break the strike of nearly 20,000 employees at the company's shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania. On September 1st, Attorney General Harry Daughtry got a federal judge to issue a sweeping injunction forbidding all activities encouraging the strike, violating the workers' First Amendment right to free speech. This was not the first, nor would it be the last time striking workers would see their First Amendment rights under attack. And so that one seems, that's interesting. We start off with the railroad story, since we have been discussing the railroads the last couple weeks, and of course we've covered the ways in which Warrior Met Coal has sought support from the courts to try to limit the pickets and protests down in Brookwood, Alabama. And moving on, September 5th was Labor Day. While listeners to this show probably know the real Labor Day is actually May 1st, International Workers' Day, I reckon we'll take the day. Labor Day honors the social and economic achievements of American workers and pays tribute to the contributions workers have made to the strength, prosperity, and well-being of the country. And according to Newsmax, if you took off Labor Day, you are a communist sympathizer. So, just make that little note. September 8th was International Literacy Day, which is meant to give children and communities a chance to rediscover the joys of reading while raising awareness about those without access to formal education. This being a labor radio program, I think we can all agree on the critical need for literacy among our fellow workers. September 10th was the 125th anniversary of the Latimer Massacre. A strike began weeks prior as miners from eastern Pennsylvania protested extremely dangerous working conditions, unpaid overtime, and the company's store. About 400 miners, mostly immigrants, began an unarmed, peaceful march to Latimer to support the newly formed United Mine Workers there. When they arrived, Luzerne County Sheriff James Martin and his deputies opened fire on the men and boys. 19 mine workers were killed and dozens were wounded in the Latimer Massacre. I recommend you check out Zen Education Project for some more details there. That was not one I'd heard of previously. September 12th was the 50th anniversary of AIM's occupation of the Oklahoma Department of Education. Approximately 50 Native Americans with the American Indian Movement took over the office of State Education Director Overton James, demanding his resignation for misappropriation of federal funds intended for education programs for Native American children. The occupation continued until a settlement was reached with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which agreed to an audit of Education Department expenditures, as well as allowing more Native input into programs affecting their children. Another example of direct action getting the goods. September 15th was the first official day of Hispanic Heritage Month, starting on the anniversary of independence for 5 Latin American countries: Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. September 17th was the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Antietam, also called the Battle of Sharpsburg down here in the South. This battle is often referred to as the bloodiest single day in U.S. history. 23,000 men were killed or wounded in just a single day of fighting. It's also an important day to remember that the Civil War, like all wars, was a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. Most of those killed or wounded were of the poorer classes. While the Union did suffer greater casualties than the Confederacy, the battle was a turning point for the North, and the Union victory at Antietam led to the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. And of course, many historians see the Civil War and Reconstruction as effectively a second American Revolution. September 18th was the 10th anniversary of the conclusion of the successful Chicago Teachers Union strike. Under the slogan, "Fighting for the Schools Chicago Students Deserve," they rallied the public to their side and beat back the powerful mayor, Rahm Emanuel. The eight-day strike by 27,000 Chicago teachers showed the importance of educators using their collective power to demand that all children get the education they deserve. The CTU's 2012 strike didn't just put the union on the map. It gave the whole labor movement a jolt of hope. It served as a model for how future organizers might build alliances among educators, parents, and community organizations in resisting the pro-corporate, pro-privatization agenda. Just a few years earlier, this was an ordinary union with run-of-the-mill problems: uninspiring leaders, inactive members, too few stewards, and a general sense of passivity and hopelessness. A few rank-and-file activists got together and changed all that. The strike continues to be a touchstone for educators and labor organizers today, and their story remains a model for anyone looking to transform a do-nothing union into a fighting force. On a personal note, the 2012 CTU strike was taking place as I was getting into teaching here in North Alabama. And I remember wanting to drive up to Chicago to march with them, but being too broke at the time to make that happen. But it really inspired me to focus my energies on the intersection of public education and the labor movement, and led to me getting involved in my local. And there are story after story after story of other union activists who were similarly inspired by the 2012 Chicago Teachers Union strike. September 21st, was the International Day of Peace. Initiated in 1981, the UN International Day of Peace is an annual commemoration aimed at encouraging all people to play a part in building a peace culture worldwide. Communities across the globe organize their own observances designed to bring people together for world peace. My own observation would be fight the boss, not their wars. September 30th was the 60th anniversary of the founding of the National Farm Workers Association. Activists led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta founded the National Farm Workers Association, now known as the United Farm Workers, in order to support and defend the rights of farm workers to decent working conditions and wages. The NFWA largely acted for change through boycotts, marches, and fasts, and is also known for mobilizing the Chicano movement in the U.S. And I want to just mention that the United Farm Workers are fighting in California right now to get legislation signed by Governor Newsom to make it easier to have union elections for the farm workers, who, if listeners may know, are excluded from some of the normal provisions of American labor law, much like domestic workers. And that's it for September Labor History.
Yeah, amazingly, he has not signed that, even after Biden wrote a letter to him urging him to sign it. And he still hasn't signed it. And
Grissom Gavin, come on, brother.
And a report recently came out saying that he's considering a run for the presidency. And I don't know how he's going to do that if Biden would be able to outflank him from his left on labor.
Right. Yeah. I understand that Big Ag is heavily influential in California, much as they are here in Alabama. But do the right thing, Governor Newsom. Sign the bill. These workers deserve to have a fair opportunity for free and fair union elections. Frankly, they deserve their union and shouldn't even have to go through the ordeal. But as Mr. Jameson just talked to us about with the union busting law firms, unfortunately, most capitalists do not take the approach of recognizing a union voluntarily.
Yep.
Even in instances where it would actually save them more money and heartache and hassle to do so.
Speaking of situations where that would be the case, we've got a pop culture union story. And I mentioned going into overtime, we're going to be talking about anime union busting. And Strom McCallum in the chat said, what in hell is anime union busting? And, well, we're about
It's not a new series out on...
Not a new series.
It's not a new series, though I'm sure you could make an interesting anime series about union busting.
I would watch it. Because I'm a big... I mean, I'm not a big anime fan, but I don't watch TV just a whole lot. But when I watch TV... the majority of the time that I watch TV, I'm watching anime, unless I'm watching like Abbott Elementary with my fiance. So,
well, I definitely grew up watching, Adult Swim and Toonami. So those were some big parts of my viewing habits growing up. Yeah, Dragon Ball Z and Cowboy Bebop and some of those programs. I'm not very in tune with anime currently, so. I'm sure if I were to go to something like Crunchyroll, I would be completely out of my element.
Yeah.
But I am aware of anime. Yeah. I know what it is.
Yeah.
Hopefully most of our listeners at least are aware of what it is, whether you watch it or not. It's not for everybody. It's kind of a unique subculture, the diehard anime fans. So always interesting when our union world intersects with these like fandoms and subcultures.
Yeah. So anime is like that Japanese animation, like Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, stuff like that. And Crunchyroll is kind of the big Netflix for anime.
Right.
They're the I think they're the biggest anime streaming service. That's like all they have. It's only anime on Crunchyroll, is my understanding. And that's where most places are going to put their anime.
And it's a paid subscription service, right?
Yes.
Like Netflix and Hulu.
And to which I am a subscriber. Potentially not for long. We'll see what comes of this. But they are apparently vehemently anti-union. They've got a new season of Mob Psycho 100. I have never seen that, but apparently there's a pretty big audience for it. They've got a new season of Mob Psycho 100, and the lead voice actor for the dub, which subs are when you see the anime in its original Japanese voice actors and you get subtitles. The dub is where they redo the audio tracks. And so they get American or English actors. And Kyle McCarley was the voice actor for Mob. Mob is the main character in Mob Psycho 100 for Season 1 and Season 2. A new season is coming out, Season 3, and there's been some changes at Crunchyroll that I'm not entirely sure what all is going. I think Sony bought them, and I'm not sure who did the dub for Mob Psycho 100 first season and second season. I'm not entirely clear on all of that, but the voice actor is a member of SAG-AFTRA. which is the actors union.
Right.
And when they approached him about doing the voice for Mob for season 3, they did not want to sign a union contract. So it must have been somebody other than Crunchyroll that was doing Mob Psycho 100 for the first and second season, because apparently it was union, because this guy's a union member and he doesn't do non-union gigs. So anyway, they have. Oh, I just got a text from Jared, another anime fan, listener to the show, IFPTE member at NASA. He says there's a free account level on Crunchyroll. Yeah, I knew that. In addition to the premium subscription, main difference is free accounts get the new episodes a week or 2 later after the premiere. I didn't know that. I thought that it was just that you get commercials if you get the free account, but apparently you get it a week or 2 later than the premiere. Crunchyroll is the main U.S. anime service because they have been able to get the licenses for the major series as opposed to torrent sites. I don't know what torrent sites are. I'm not deep enough, I guess, into the anime.
Torrents, that's like from back in my teenage years. That's how we stole all that music and movies.
Gotcha.
And yeah.
So yeah, that's so I appreciate that, Jared, for that. I'm a pretty pop level anime consumer, I think. So I appreciate that. And so Kyle McCarley put out a YouTube video. It's about 5 minutes long, explaining the situation, and it's short enough that that there really isn't a whole lot of chaff to cut from the wheat. But it's also long enough that I thought it might be weird just to play it and then react to it. So we're gonna play it, and we're gonna stop and pause and react as we go along this clip. So Adam, let's go ahead and play this clip from Kyle McCarley, the English voice actor for Mob in Mob Psycho 100. Explain what's going on at Crunchyroll.
Hi everybody, Kyle McCarley here. You may know me as the English voice of Shigeo Kageyama, aka Mob, in the anime series Mob Psycho 100. I'm making this video to let you know that, well, first of all, in case you weren't aware, there is a 3rd season of Mob Psycho 100 on the way very, very soon. As a fan myself, I was super excited about this. I'm a big fan of the show. I love playing Mob. And I love you guys, the fans. You guys have been incredible over the years. But I'm making this video because I wanted to let you know that there have been talks over the past couple of weeks between the cast of the show and Crunchyroll, who's producing the show, about potentially producing this season of the show on a SAG-AFTRA union contract. And as a result of those conversations, I'm making this video because it's looking very, very likely that I will not be reprising my role as Mob. I know for some of you that probably sucks to hear. Believe me, it sucks a lot to say. I'm really, really bummed about this. But I wanted to let you all know how we got here and where here is. As a SAG-AFTRA union member and a member of the SAG-AFTRA dubbing steering committee, it's really, really important to me personally that all the work that I do be covered by a SAG-AFTRA union contract. For those of you who don't know, SAG-AFTRA is a union that represents actors. Unions exist to protect their workers. I could get into the nitty-gritty about why unions are a good thing and why SAG-AFTRA exists and what they do for performers like myself, but I'm not going to muddy up this video with all that information. If you're curious, you can just scroll through the Twitter thread that follows this post. It has been made.
Can pause that for a second, because we will be going through his analysis of unions, because I think that it's a really good kind of pop level explainer about what unions are, and we're gonna show you a tweet of the audience's reaction to this Twitter thread and to this video, because it's been really heartening seeing the audience's reaction. I think it's been really interesting, and I've been happy to see stuff like that. So
yeah, I think he is clearly aware that he's speaking to an audience that are not labor nerds. They're anime nerds, right? And I say that lovingly. I'm not trying to be disparaging in any way, because I know that I am a nerd when it comes to unions and follow them very obsessively and read everything I can and watch everything I can. And but that's a very rare or small segment of the population. And certainly I think he's aware that he's speaking to people who are committed, loyal fans of this anime series who may know almost nothing about unions.
Yeah.
So I like that he kind of gives you just enough to let you know this is a good thing, this is why. But, you know, because I think it is easy sometimes for us to regardless of whether we're talking union or not, to get kind of stuck in our own bubbles and forget that not everybody is in tune with everything we're in tune with. And sometimes we have to have some shared vocabulary and meet people where they're at on different topics.
Yep. Yeah, let's go ahead and continue.
Abundantly clear to me that in the case of Season 3 of Mob Psycho 100, Crunchyroll is not going to be producing that show on a SAG-AFTRA contract. And I want to put this little note in here just to be very, very clear. It's not about money. They were prepared to pay me at least what I would be getting on a union scale contract, possibly more. They just don't want to put it on a union contract. With
and now let's pause there,
99%.
because this is something that we see across industries in some cases. We do see occasionally. Now, of course, we understand that in the main, union workers are going to be making more. But we do see occasionally, we see industries, we see individual bosses that are willing to pay more as long as they don't have to put it on a union contract. Why is that? Well, because union contracts are, legally binding. You cannot unilaterally change them. If if it's not a union contract, you can, as the boss, as the employer, unilaterally change it. There's also beyond wages. There are other things that unions fight for: safety, health, quality of life, time off, things like this that go into union contracts. There's also more than one person involved in a union contract, and so maybe they're willing to pay this guy who's the lead actor on this. They're willing to pay him a lot of money. But what happens if it's a SAG-AFTRA union contract? Well, that means other people are in there too, and they've got to pay other people more, and that's an issue as well. And so the fact that he's willing to even potentially take a pay cut to do it on a union contract so that the other people get the benefit of it and so that he gets the other ancillary benefits of it speaks to, I think, his commitment to solidarity and his, I think that speaks well to his character that he's willing to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're right. This is something we see a lot where ultimately bosses and industries prioritize power, sometimes even over profits in the short term.
Right.
I mean, look at Warrior Matt Cole and the amount of money that they have left
$1 billion on the table.
Yeah, they have spent a tremendous amount of money. They've lost a lot of potential money from mines being inactive. And, if you add all those costs up, hell, they could have just settled this contract 500 days ago.
Right.
And probably have been better off.
Yes.
But, and of course they'll frame this as flexibility. The bosses want flexibility. But what it's really about is about the relationship to power there. And bosses don't want to share.
Yeah.
Not good at sharing.
Yeah, let's continue.
Of the work that I do, that would be the end of the conversation for me. I would say, thank you very much for the opportunity, but I don't work non-union. But with the help of my castmates, who I've been in close contact with throughout the course of these negotiations, I was able to see an opportunity here. Crunchyroll has historically been very, very hesitant to take anything that they produce onto a SAG-AFTRA contract. And just because of the role that I have in this particular show and this particular show's popularity with you guys, it seemed like maybe there was an opportunity to change that. So I went back to Crunchyroll with the offer that I would agree to work on this season of this show, non-union, on the condition that they agree to sit down and meet with SAG-AFTRA representatives with the purposes of negotiating a potential contract for them to use on future productions. That's all I was asking. Not a commitment to definitely guaranteed make such an agreement happen, not a commitment to definitely guarantee using such an agreement if it came into existence, just an agreement to good faith negotiations. An agreement to sit down and have a conversation.
This is really, really a basic ask. Like, you can't, there could be no lesser ask here. You know, there's no commitment on either side. It's just like, meet with us. Just meet with us. And you know, I think that's an interesting ask. He said, you know, he's talked about that with his castmates, and you know, we certainly support them in this ask, and think that it's the least that Crunchyroll can do, getting this union actor on a non-union contract for a meeting.
Right.
There's no commitments, no strings.
Just sit down and talk.
That is, I mean, that's incredibly generous from Kyle here. This is an incredibly generous offer from Kyle and from the union. Just a meeting, and I'll give you a whole season of my labor. So let's see how they responded.
On their own terms, where SAG-AFTRA can present the needs of the performers that they represent on a contract with any given employer, and a conversation where Crunchyroll can present their needs as a production company and just find out if there's any middle ground to be found between those two so that a contract could be made for future productions. As far as where things stand right now, Crunchyroll's a big corporation. There's a lot of people that have to weigh in on a decision like this, most of whom I have not spoken to. But all I needed them to do was agree to sit down and have a conversation, and it seems like that's not something that they want to do. So I just wanted to let you guys know that unless things change, you're probably going to be hearing at least one unfamiliar voice on Mob Psycho 100 Season 3. Maybe more. I don't want to speak for anybody in particular, and I certainly don't want to cast judgment or blame against any actor who takes whatever work opportunities they're given. Everybody's in different situations in their lives and in their careers, and they all have to make their own decisions and the decisions that are best for them. And I'm not going to begrudge anybody for that. Thank you guys so very much for your support. I love you all, and I hope that the next time I talk to you, I will have some happier news to share.
So I think that was a good video about the situation, and unfortunately the update it's not good news. And Adam, let's go to that graphic from the Kotaku article, and the title is Mob Psycho 100's English voice actor probably isn't coming back because of Crunchyroll, and they posted an update to that article that same day that the video came out. Crunchyroll replied. Crunchyroll's the anime production company. Kotaku is the anime news service. Crunchyroll replied to Kotaku saying, quote, Crunchyroll is excited to bring fans worldwide the dub for the third season of Mob Psycho 100. We will need to recast some roles. We're excited for fans to enjoy the new voice talent and greatly thank any departing cast for their contributions to previous seasons. So it seems like we've got a confirmation here that they're going to replace Kyle on that production.
Which totally sucks.
Which really sucks, and I think goes to show the depravity of the corporate executives at Crunchyroll.
Right.
I mean, could you imagine giving up the lead role that clearly, from the audience reaction that we're going to show you here in a bit, clearly people have a connection to, because you don't want to meet with him. You do not want to have a meeting with him and his union representatives. And so you're willing to cut the leading actor from their role. That's amazing. That's appalling.
Yeah, I mean, and I've witnessed that kind of stuff before, where bosses it's like the very act of meeting with you is beneath them.
Right.
And that's the sort of attitude they have, and that's kind of the vibe I'm getting here, because obviously Kyle was extremely nice about this.
Yeah.
Extremely low level of escalation here.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I mean, you couldn't really ask for any less, I don't think, at this point. So, there's nothing about what I just witnessed would make me scared to have a meeting with that guy.
Seriously.
You know, he's not riling, even after he already kind of sees the writing on the wall that he's probably going to get screwed here. He's still not riling people up. He's not being defamatory. He's still playing it really cool. And sometimes it's really hurtful when you see workers who are going about things like the nice, polite, professional way, trying to work through the process, trying to play the game a little bit, and they get screwed even then, despite trying all they could.
Yeah. He mentioned that he has a Twitter thread where he goes more in depth about unions, and so let's take a look at that, because obviously that's something that his fans have seen, and then we want to talk about the fan reaction to this. So his first set of tweets, he had 8 tweets about that, and so the first set of tweets say, unions protect the workers they represent chiefly by giving them collective bargaining power, meaning that instead of negotiating the terms of your employment individually, one-on-one, the union negotiates baseline minimums for everyone all at once. This generally leads to better terms for all workers because, as a collective, you have sway in these negotiations. How much you get paid, how long your hours are, how hard those hours are, how often you get breaks or time off, what safety precautions are taken, etc. So, you know, I think this is some really good stuff. And with voice actors, I can't remember if I saw another interview with Kyle or if it was a different voice actor, but they mentioned that, you know, voice actors, they have to yell a lot for their job. There's a lot of there's a lot of real strain on your voice that is expected of a voice actor. And so one of the things that voice actors are able to secure in their union contracts is like, I'm only able to do, you know, voice acting or, you know, I will only do voice acting that is this strenuous for this amount of time or something like that. And that's a very important, you know, I mean, if you've ever been to, you know, a football game where you've yelled a lot, right? Just the next day, your voice is shot the whole day, right? And so imagine this is your job, you know, and so you definitely, that's a legitimate safety precaution that people in other industries aren't going to have to worry about, that their union, that they, through their union, are able to fight for. Second set of tweets said, it is from this. It is from this set of tweets. So here he says, just one example of how SAG-AFTRA, in the second set of tweets, of how SAG-AFTRA helps voiceover performers specifically is by negotiating terms that protect us from vocally stressful work. We often have to do a lot of screaming/shouting on the job, but our contracts ensure it's never too long a time. Our union's also gone to great lengths to educate both us and our employers on the dangers of vocally stressful work, and there are plenty of other benefits, but the big ones I want to point out are the health insurance and retirement fund. And so, you know, those are really good things. The third set of tweets, he says, America does not have universal health insurance. We pay for coverage, which can be expensive, and it often doesn't cover everything. Some workers can get it from their employers, which often means better/more affordable coverage, but that's not possible for performers. We're freelancers. We work for a lot of different employers in very short bursts, so it wouldn't make any financial sense for any of them to give us health and retirement benefits on their own, and that's where SAG-AFTRA comes in. And the final set of tweets, he says, by collecting a small percentage on top of our fee, on top of our union dues for every job we work on, SAG-AFTRA funds a phenomenal health plan that's very affordable for qualifying members, as well as a retirement plan. These are huge reasons for actors to work union. I could probably go on for days about this, and we would love for him to come on the show if he wanted to. We weren't able to get in touch with him this week, but if anybody who's listening to this happens to know Kyle McCarley, let him know that our doors are open. I could probably go on for days about this, but those are the big bullet points I wanted to cover for those unfamiliar/uncertain about the benefits of unionization that wouldn't fit in the video. So really good public education work by Union Brother Kyle McCarley here. Really good representation of the labor movement, and a really good illustration by virtue of Crunchyroll's actions of the depravity of bosses and corporate executives. And it is that depravity and that illustration of the depravity of corporate executives and bosses that that has really sent the anime fandom into a tizzy. And this tweet from @the CJ Wilson is really representative of a lot of responses that we've seen. There's been a lot of pictures of Mob, the main character that he voices, with union signs. There's been fan art and stuff like that. Lots of very supportive tweets, and this one I think really kind of encapsulates everything. And it says, "Have you ever fucked up a professional negotiation so badly that you accidentally made all anime fans class conscious?" So I think.
Nice.
I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I hope something comes out of it in that way. I hope that, as bad as I feel for Kyle and what he's going through, and certainly I relate to that struggle of retaliation, but I hope that folks get educated out of this process and maybe some folks, especially young folks who are really into anime and have been following this guy's career and his work, have learned something about unions and have learned something about the labor movement and have learned something about labor versus capital in the marketplace and the way these dynamics play out all too often. I think a lot of times people don't necessarily see these relationships for what they are.
Right.
I think sometimes folks assume that the company's looking out for them, or that, well, we just have to be happy with whatever we can get. But there's a power imbalance inherent in the employer-employee relationship. And if some folks who don't think about those things, if some folks who are, spending all their free time on anime and not politics and not unions, if they had a wake-up call with this moment, I think Kyle can be proud to know that he played a role in that. And that's what I hope happens. And, I think that's one of the things that we have to do in labor is pull in different communities, pull in different niche groups, subgroups, fandoms, and tie things into culture. When there's a labor issue happening, is there a way to activate people in the popular community? And I think we have to be creative about that. Like, this is an opportunity to activate people in the anime community. There are opportunities to activate artists, musical artists, other, actors, and celebrities sometimes even. I'm not big on celebrity culture and obsessing over celebrities, but sometimes that can help. Sometimes you can get celebrities on your side or use them as a pressure point. I'm thinking about a particular situation where scabs are being used instead of union labor to assemble concerts and put on shows. Well, maybe we need to talk to the bands that are coming through. And so I hope that also what comes of this for Kyle is that there are conversations happening with other voice actors.
Right.
And I hope that, they can really break through in this industry and break through with a company like Crunchyroll, because it sounds like they are a really major player. If they're snatching up licensing for all these different programs coming out of Japan, if they're doing original programming, they're a pretty major player in this part of the entertainment industry. And so it would be great to see unions really break through. It's a shame to see Crunchyroll react the way they have, but maybe fans can do some organizing to put pressure on the company. I'm a big fan of consumer boycotts when and where they can be effective. And this is a situation where I think possibly it could be.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep you updated on what happens there, what the union calls for, what Kyle calls for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ben, have we got Mel on the line? Oh, no. Oh, no. Gotcha. Well, hopefully that wraps up here pretty soon. We will we'll do this JD Vance hit really quick. It's like we'll take 5 minutes on that while maybe we maybe Mel's fire alarms will stop going off. And so were you about to say something, Ben? Okay. Yeah, so and keep us updated on what Mel says. And Mel, I'm sure you're listening. Let Ben know when and if the fire alarms stop going off. So Jonah Furman, friend of the show, came on last weekend to talk about the rail situation. Jonah Furman is in More Perfect Union yesterday talking about J.D. Vance and the Kroger workers fight in Ohio. And so some background on that is that on September 13th, 14th, and 15th, he said, thousands of Kroger workers cast ballots at grocery stores across central Ohio to reject a contract offer and authorize what would be the first large grocery strike in the state in 2 decades. So this is okay, great. Yeah, and so this is a very, very big deal here in Ohio. And we're looking at, like Jonah said, thousands of grocery store workers in Ohio. And this is the third contract offer that they've rejected in 2 months. So they are really kind of dead set on fighting this proposal from Kroger, from the company. And you would think that J.D. Vance, with his platform as being, I'm fighting for, quote, the white working class, which is something that he's really concerned about. There are a lot of white workers in addition to black and brown and women working at Kroger, but there are a lot of white workers working at Kroger. You would think that in his state, thousands of people, some of whom are white, if that matters, are going on strike. You would think that would be something that he would be willing to comment on, but he has refused to. He's refused to tweet about it. He's refused to release a statement. He's refused to reply to reporters who are asking him about it. And so this is yet another example in countless examples of these right-wing politicians who claim to be populist, refusing to fight for working people, refusing to even say that they support working people, much less using any power culturally or otherwise that they might have to fight for them, much less doing anything material, just saying, I support workers that work at Kroger in Ohio as they look to go on strike. He can't even do that.
Right. I mean, to issue such a statement might upset his donors.
Right.
And it might upset the true oligarchs that he represents. And I think you're right. I know we're about to bring Mel in, so I'll keep this short, but I think you're right that it's specifically geared towards white working class people. And when they talk about this working class populism, they're talking about a subset of white, culturally conservative people. And that's what they mean. When they say working class, it's almost like a shorthand for, normal white guys who don't like the queers and all that stuff.
Well, but
that's
even then, they're not actually interested in fighting for them economically.
Oh no,
in
absolutely
the sense
not.
That,
they just want to appeal
to their cultural grievances,
right? That they themselves help create, right? Because those don't come. It's not as if you're born into a white working class family, and so automatically you're going to be anti-gay or anti-immigrant. Those things are just drilled into you from multiple directions. But yeah, just another example. J.D. Vance, he's a total joke.
And it's worth pointing out, as Jonah does in his article, that Democrat Tim Ryan, who we can have issues with, is campaigning for Senate as a pro-worker, pro-labor candidate. And in a statement provided to More Perfect Union, Ryan took the Kroger workers' side in the struggle.
Good.
Quoting from Tim Ryan,
Pleasantly surprised.
yeah. Well, I'm not. He's been a pretty pro-union guy, even if he's, there are some other things that he's kind of weird on. But he says, quote, "Throughout the pandemic, Ohio's grocery workers have risked their lives to keep our stores open, shelves stocked, and neighbors fed. I stand with these essential workers in their fight for a contract that honors their hard work, including fair wages and fair health care benefits." So we appreciate that from Tim Ryan, running for Senate in Ohio. That's not a bad statement. That's a good statement. And again, another example of there is a however small it may be, and however infuriating it is, there is a difference. So there's a difference between Republicans and Democrats. Let's go to Mel. Mel Buer is now the associate editor at the Real News Network. She's got a fancy, smancy editing gig, and she joins a little Union Talk radio program in Alabama. We appreciate your time, Mel Buer. Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Going good. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. It means a lot, and we're really excited about your being the associate editor with editor-in-chief Maximilian Alvarez at the Real News. I think y'all are going to make a great team.
I'm so excited. I'm very excited. It's going to be a really fun time. Max and I have a lot of fun working together, and I'm really stoked to be able to lend my experience to a really, really fantastic publication that I've been working with. So pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. Have y'all got any, have you already created with him like a 5-10 year master plan that you're going to be implementing with, under your rule?
Oh, well, no, I haven't even started yet. I'll start on Monday, and, we'll see what we can come up with. I think we've got some cool ideas. So yeah, I think it's going to be good. It's going to be good. Awesome. Good time.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to reading what y'all put out. And you did, I guess this is going to be your last piece for the Real News as a freelance writer. But it was about the Case New Holland strike in Iowa.
Yep.
So, can you give us some of the background about this strike? Case New Holland, what do these workers do? What does the company make? And what is the strike about?
So Case New Holland is an industrial manufacturing plant that is like the biggest competitor to John Deere. So they make industrial agricultural equipment and contracting equipment, so bulldozers and things like that. The two plants that are currently on strike are in Racine, Wisconsin, and Burlington, Iowa. They are represented by the UAW. They're one of two of three unionized plants within the company. And these two plants walked out on strike at the end of their contract on May 2nd. So they've been on strike since then, just finished their 20th week, heading into their 21st week on strike. Makes up about, I'd say about 1,000 workers between the two locations. And where I went was to Burlington. And this was back in July. And I had a chance to really kind of sit down with folks there and get a sense of what is sort of the crux of the issue in terms of negotiations with these workers. And it comes down to increase in wages that sort of account for the cost of living increases due to inflation and other issues over the last couple of years. They want their health insurance to stay steady and not see major increases in health insurance premiums. And they're looking for better overtime and vacation policies. And right now they're still in the midst of, I would say, I wouldn't call it necessarily a stalemate. They're back at the negotiating table this week, but over the course of the summer, they've been having a pretty intense back and forth with the company about what they're looking for and in a new tentative agreement, and they have not reached it yet.
And the strike being in its 5th month is pretty, usually strikes don't last this long. And that's one of the reasons, or that's a big reason that we wanted to talk to you about this, because like the Warrior Met strike in Brookwood, the Case New Holland strike, it seems to be, and it could be because also like Warrior Met, this isn't 20,000, 10, 15,000 workers. This is 1,000 workers for one company, in Iowa. Is that a correct read, that there's just not a whole lot of media coverage about this strike?
Well, there's certainly local coverage. So you're seeing a lot of state and local coverage, a lot of publications, both in Racine and in Burlington, are, checking in and the picket line relatively often. You're seeing a lot of updates at some of the ag publications, so the agricultural publications that directly deal with this kind of news, that have been following the negotiations well before it reached this point. But as far as, national or international news, as was the case with John Deere, not much. I mean, the closest you get to it is right before Bernie Sanders spoke at Labor Notes conference in July. He stopped off at both picket lines and gave speeches at both Burlington and Racine. That's pretty much it. Terms of major coverage. I mean, it's I would consider that kind of an ongoing thing. It's a lot different to try and cover Midwest labor struggles. There are a lot of them. Folks don't tend to spend a whole lot of time on them unless they are something as high profile as the Kellogg strike. But in general, that's just, the typical way to handle these types of labor struggles, unfortunately,
Right.
It's just the way the media works here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that there is local coverage, because the folks down in Brookwood can't even get that. I'm glad to hear that there is some amount of local coverage, and really, that is, it's nice to be profiled in, the New York Times or even, national, maybe more indie outlets like the Real News, but the local news is what's going to be driving, public opinion in the area where it matters. And so I'm glad to hear that. And of course, we wouldn't be privy to that, or it'd be less difficult to gauge that being not in the local area.
Right.
And you mentioned that that Case New Holland is a big competitor with John Deere. How did the John Deere strike last year play into these workers' willingness to go on strike themselves? Do you think that gave them some amount of confidence that they could get a better deal?
Well, certainly John Deere workers are they're represented by the UAW as well. And many folks from the UAW locals that represent John Deere workers in the area have shown up to the picket line, have held fundraisers to keep the strike kitchen stocked. They spend, regular moments dropping things off if they're nearby. So, there's a feeling of solidarity, right? Because the competition that happens between these companies generally doesn't extend to the employees who are making these items, right? It's mostly about what the corporations want to do in terms of cornering out a piece of the market, if you will. And I should say that, Case New Holland is it's got 13 locations across the country. They're all sort of engaged in the same sort of manufacturing. And so when you have, two of those unionized locations walking out, it's good to see that there is that sort of solidarity that has nothing to do with the competition between the employers. And I think a lot of workers, the sense that I got when I was out on the line, I was out there about 2 months into their strike. The folks there are very aware of what they're asking for in terms of, they're not asking for a whole lot. They're asking for what they deserve, and that's something that you hear a lot. These folks put years, decades into this job. They sacrifice their bodies for this job, and they ask for, just the modicum of respect that you would think you have earned from your tenure at that place, right? and time again, we see these companies just kind of overstepping that or stepping on their necks, really, and saying, no, we don't actually respect the value of your labor. And so often these unions are like, okay, bet, let's show you what the value of our labor is. We'll walk out, and I don't think it was ever a question about whether they would or wouldn't. It was more about, how much leverage they have and what they can hopefully pressure the company to come to terms to using the strike to their advantage. And I think, I think most folks on the line are ready to go back to work, but also willing to stay out for as long as necessary to get a fair contract. So.
And, speaking about that leverage, you said that there are 13 Case New Holland plants, and 2 of them that are unionized are going on strike. Right, they're on strike right now. Are the others unionized and their contracts just don't line up, or are the other 11 plants non-union?
I believe there's one more union plant in North Dakota. I don't think they're represented by the UAW. I would have to double check that information, but that contract is, I believe, on a different schedule. So these 2 contracts are on the same negotiating schedule, and so they're negotiating together. As far as I know, between the locals are 807 in Burlington and 130, I believe, in Racine. So that negotiating team is working out a contract for both locations. Every other location has not had a successful union drive yet to date.
Do we have a sense of how it's affecting their production?
I was just recently reading some information, some reports from an agricultural sort of digest, if you will. Initially, the companies, the dealers that buy this equipment were concerned that they would see a sharp dip in production. It's and take this with a grain of salt, but it sounds like it's not as sharp as they thought it was going to be, but it is still definitely cutting into their ability to sell quality equipment, and that something like 20% of dealers have reported over the last 5 months that the scab equipment that is being shipped out is not good quality or has some pretty major issues that would be addressed if it were built union made. So, we're seeing that they are taking a hit here. Now it's really just kind of as it is with these corporations. It's the sort of race to the bottom. How long can the corporations hold out against this workforce before it really starts to eat into their profits? As long as the UAW is providing weekly support to these strikers, I think that we can see that the picket lines will remain, and we're not going to see much movement except at the negotiating table. So
you mentioned some of the employers' response in your article, and I wanted to quote this. In an attempt to sow division between rank and file and the union leadership, Case New Holland took out a full-page ad in the Journal-Times that directly addressed striking workers and enjoined them to accept the contract terms already on the table. That's pretty... that's pretty wild, taking out a full-page ad in the local newspaper trying to get the workers to, take the scraps that we're offering you.
I mean, are you surprised, though, when you think about it? The great lengths. I mean, how many times have we had conversations, you and I, on this show about the lengths that employers will go to in order to bust unions and bust the power of unions? Whether it's a white paper calling union organizers terrorists or, spending millions of dollars on union busting firms for what captive audience meetings that ultimately don't provide what they think it's going to provide. They kept Kellogg's workers out on the line for tens of millions of dollars a day. They're willing to do that because when it comes down to it, it's not really about the money that they would be losing. It's about maintaining power over their workforce. And, if they budge even an inch, that the unions, as they rightfully should, will take the mile that is earned, that they have earned, that is owed to them. And so seeing that they've taken out a full page ad in the Journal-Times is not surprising. And I don't think, again, from the conversations that I've had with folks, it's not having its intended effect. If anything, the strike has sort of sewed up some of those divisions, right? Especially in Burlington, which is a company that has two different sides to its manufacturing. It's got an agricultural side and it's got a construction side. And those two sides didn't talk to each other until the strike happened. Those workers now know each other by name, by family member, right? They've been able to build solidarity out on the picket line in a way that they maybe have not had the chance to before. And that's really kind of given them the strength and the determination that is required in order to remain on the picket line. And, you know, I think that's not something that the company particularly anticipated. And so they're not pulling any punches. They're doing their best, you know.
Right. And so, you know, I was going to ask you about how the striking workers have responded to those attempts to sow division, but I think you already answered the question there. And it's that they are they're not allowing the company to divide them. And I think that we have seen in other strikes, workers come together over, beyond some divisions that they might have had before, whether that be by, department or race or gender. Being on strike, doing such a militant thing, I think it is inherently uniting, and and it's good to see that they're able to withstand some of those efforts to divide them.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, those are relationships that are forged in struggle, and that's a whole different type of relationship that is not easy to build. But what I think once it's there, can be incredibly powerful, and there's a lot of potential there. And that's what I certainly hope to see in this case. That as they come together and as they're unifying against the company's attacks, that they discover that they're way more powerful than they ever thought, and that they have more in common than they ever thought. And, hopefully that can be leveraged into a very successful outcome for the strike.
I agree, and again, this has also brought in members of the community who maybe weren't aware of working conditions at the plant. There are some case employees who spoke to me back in July who said that community members had always just referred to them as rich folks, right? You work at case, you make a lot of money, and when you hear the stories of these workers who are, subject to pretty intense health insurance premium increases, they're subject to the same bouts of inflation and injury and things that, really cut into the wages that you take home every day, not to mention stagnant wages as well. They start to see, the Facebook posts and again, Burlington is a tight-knit, small Iowa community, it's a relatively sizable town, but it's still just a town and everyone knows everyone, and so it's really interesting to see how the community has sort of woken up to this particular struggle. And they've seen, mixed reactions, as you do when you see this kind of action take place, but they've also seen, sustained support from other businesses or, individuals who are helping out at the strike kitchen, for example, or who are continuing to bring food to the picket line, right? And, you also see some of the individuals who maybe have crossed the picket line to provide goods and services to the folks in the plant, the replacement workers and the like. And so folks take notice, right? And you start to kind of see how that sort of those lines get drawn within the community. And I think response writ large has been mostly positive and supportive. And I think most folks are really rooting for the workers to come out of this with a fair and equitable contract. So
I saw in your article that there are local businesses that have signs that say "Proud Union Home," like those yard signs that say "Proud Union Home" in their windows, in their front
really
windows
cool.
for their business. And so that's a pretty interesting dynamic there, I think.
Yeah, when I showed up to Burlington, I was going, funnily enough, my train was delayed 10, 12 hours because of supply chain freight issues down the line. Yeah. And, I showed up way too late to go to the picket line and ended up just checking into my little B&B and walking down to the city center. And I walked into one of those bars that had, proud union home sign in the window, and sat down with some of the folks who were just there to watch whatever baseball game was on. And most folks there are like, oh yeah, I've lived here my whole life. And, I understand what it's like to fight bosses like this. And you can kind of you heard the conversations amongst folks who are, ready to sort of like really kind of put their support at the forefront of their own businesses. And, it was interesting to see which bars had business and which bars didn't have business based on who had a sign in their window,
Wow.
Fascinating sort of cultural thing happening there. Yeah, interesting experience. And it was as usual, really lovely to sit down and talk to workers for a weekend. So
not to get too off topic here, but something you just described, I think is really interesting, and I think we're gonna maybe have to wrestle with more publicly, is that if roughly 70% of people now support unions according to the polls, even there in the small case, the bars putting the union sign out front obviously can help with customers, the union members themselves, but their families, their friends, anyone supporting the union, they're going to know that, okay, that's the bar I want to go to. And, I'm wondering at what point do we see more like intra-capitalist competition where some start to lean into unions being popular, being popularly conceived as a good thing, because there was a time in this country where some companies did lean into the fact that they had union labor, or that they worked with other unions. And so, yeah, I'm just curious to see, that's a really small example, it rooted in a very, bitter local struggle. But as these struggles spread across the country and they get more publicity and it's clear whose side the people are on, I'm just wondering, at some point, some of these capitalists are going to like put two and two together and be like, you know what, we might actually even make more money or have better PR if we meet them halfway, or, recognize a union and then lean into that in our marketing. Or I'm just, unfortunately, liberalism and neoliberalism in particular appropriates anything and everything, just the way they've appropriated racial justice as like a marketing technique. And I'm kind of waiting for the day that like workers' rights and unions become commodified in that way.
Well, certainly you do see this already. I mean, I'm sure that we could find many, many cases of corporations who are locked in like bitter struggles, union struggles, that ultimately union drives are successful. Then the companies can kind of bank on the fact that now their labor is producing union products with a nice cool union bug on it. You know what I mean? But the internal politics and the ways in which the corporations try to skirt those contract provisions or, cut corners in ways where unions are just filing grievance after grievance after grievance. Those kind of things just you don't see that kind of fades into the background. You think of like popular struggles like the Kellogg strike. Ultimately, the strike was ultimately something that you could consider to be successful. You're buying Kellogg's products with the union bug on them. It's made by union workers. But how many times do you think about what happens after a strike like that? How many workers have been retaliated against, as a result of their organizing activity, right? It's sort of this like seedy, not so nice piece that a lot of folks tend to just kind of gloss over when we think about major labor victories. And I think because we live in a capitalist society, and we, are subject to these sort of popular tides or trends, though I wouldn't call the labor movement that by any stretch of the imagination, right? It's not some sort of trend, hopefully, right? It's just a reimagining of victorious heydays of the last 200 years, right? I think that the left's ability, or I should say the labor movement's ability to sort of take that good press and use that to pressure better working conditions in these spaces to say, okay, corporation, you want to be proud to be union? Well, you're not really putting your money where your mouth is. Let's actually kind of use this as like a vehicle to be able to continue to improve working conditions. There's something to be said for that.
Yeah. I think that's reflected in the wave of organizing we've seen at nonprofits and like quote unquote progressive institutions and companies, and even some of the labor struggles that we see within unions themselves with their own staff unions, of practicing what you preach. And it's been interesting to watch that play out as some of these organizations kind of can put their finger in the air, see which way the wind's blowing, and get things worked out pretty easily. And then others, the true colors come out. As soon as the word union's mentioned, the true colors really, really come out.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you also see this as well with the sort of reforms that you're seeing in some of the larger business unions, right? The industrial unions, like the UAW, right? Where you're seeing this newer generation of reform-minded rank and file workers going, practice what you preach here. Let's improve these conditions within our own union so that we are better suited to engage in these very large, multi-million dollar sort of struggles against these billion-dollar corporations. If we really want to move forward and improve the lives of our membership, here's a way that we could maybe do that. And I think that as well is like a very interesting sort of more public sort of front that's opened up as we've sort of seen this happen over the last couple of years. Granted, I'm fairly I'm a new entrant to the labor reporting sort of game, right? I have a lot to learn, but this is just the sort of things that I've seen since I've sort of raised that personal consciousness in the last couple of years. And it's exciting to see, and there's a lot of really cool potential there. We got a lot of bosses on the back foot too. And I think they're freaking scared of what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years. So,
yeah.
I think it's fitting that you come after we talked to Dave Jamieson and he went over that Littler-Mendelson report where they are saying that basically they're admitting that they're worried. They see a new era of union energy and union organizing, and they're concerned about it. They would prefer you to hire them to handle it, but they recognize this moment, and it's been great to see internal union reform being put out into the popular consciousness. Like just in the last few months, I've actually had conversations with rank and file workers about, hey, did you know there are people trying to reshape the Teamsters? Did you know there are people inside UAW trying to make it a more democratic union, a stronger fighting union, bring back the heyday of the UAW? Those conversations are happening out here. And certainly more so than I can remember. And I think that's really, it's promising. It's promising, if this was all just from institutional labor and from executive directors and national presidents, and that would be one thing, but it really is a bottom-up grassroots energy that's propelling these things, and I don't know how much you've seen of that in these particular strikes in Iowa, how much grassroots energy versus like the top-down or headquarters support kind of thing, but that's what I'm seeing is there's a lot of bottom-up energy being infused into the labor movement and kind of just manifesting in different ways.
Certainly in the sort of limited struggles that I've had the privilege to kind of step into and tell stories about, the general consensus is that the rank and file are driving the organization of this, right? And union leadership is sort of taking their cues from the rank and file, knowing full well that like if they don't provide or bring back something that's going to be useful for their membership don't care. They will just vote it down, right? It's how you see the sort of reforms that you were hoping to see stick at the UAW convention, right? The rank and file are the ones who really pushed for those types of things. You see this sort of change in the way that they do their voting. You'd see the change in the way that they introduce these resolutions for their membership, right? Obviously, you're still seeing pushback, as we saw with the increase in strike pay per week unfortunately, which would have directly benefited the folks in Burlington, and for a time frustrated the folks picketing in Burlington, right? However, the idea here is that, rank and file membership are standing shoulder to shoulder, and it's producing results, and it's an sort of empowering moment for these folks. And, you see a lot of folks who are finding that their participation in these types of labor actions is a galvanizing, sort of energizing force for them to continue to lend more time and energy to improving and participating in the wider labor movement outside of their own personal struggles at their own workplace,
Like they get a taste of the struggle, and it just, brings them all the way in to next thing you know, they're at somebody else's strike.
Right. And that is fantastic. And it's very cool to see that happening on a wider scale, like Sean O'Brien showing up for and working with Amazon workers, right? And bringing the Teamsters into a sort of wider united front for pressuring Amazon executives to allow this union drives to continue. Stuff like that is exactly the sort of energy that we need as we go forward into what could be a pretty contentious sort of general election campaign year.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the potential for changes to really take place within the NLRB in a new administration, if that comes to that, right?
Right.
Even with, the movement of the Biden administration, which I would consider to be sort of glacial in its pace to give more support to the wider labor movement. All of that is things to sort of think about and see how, the building of this national and international solidarity across unions is going to be crucial,
Totally agree. William in the chat says, absolutely no one wants a business union cozy with the bosses or co-opted by the Democratic Party. Those days are over. We're going to build a radical bottom-up movement.
Hell
William,
yeah. Amen.
From your fingers to God's ears, Mel Buer, associate editor of the Real News Network. We appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
All right, folks. So that's going to be it for us today. Biometronome in the chat says, according to their personal experience with corrupt unions and corrupt news propaganda, many workers have extremely cynical views of unions, and they believe there are differences. And it looks like he's going to be sending us another chat here soon. But yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yep.
When I was working for AEA and I was beating the bushes to recruit members, one of the things that happened a lot was people had a bad experience. Hey, I was at this such and such school at such and such district, such and such let me down. Or, the association let me down, so I'm not going to join now. And that's something that we have to wrestle with, is that the labor movement has been on decline for, at least 5 decades, arguably longer.
Right.
So not everyone who has had a personal relationship or a personal experience with organized labor
has a good one.
Right. And that's something we have to address and break through to people. Because you can't just leave them out there kind of burned out or disgruntled, because first of all, they need your help, and second, they're, we need their help.
Right.
Yep. I really appreciate everybody tuning in today. I know that there were some technical difficulties. It sort of made things trickier on our end. Hopefully the listening experience, though, was comparable to normal.
Yeah.
I hope everyone has a great weekend. Get some rest. I hope your favorite ball team wins whatever game they're playing, and you can enjoy some time with your friends and family. And I really appreciate everyone who's been tuning in today. We've had some good chats. We've had some good guests today. So thanks, everybody.
We'll see you next week.